Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the button, hit the notifications bell. Should be yet another great late night conversation. Just getting everything up here all set, getting ready to do our usual late night conversation thing. Couple announcements to make tonight before we get going. Anyway, we'll get into that later. So yeah, let's do it.
The American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is just a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. So glad to be here with all of you tonight. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Always a great thing to do. We're going to have yet another one of our late night conversations. Before we get going, quick reminder, just so everyone's aware of the way we do things here. I give my opening remarks. That's just kind of off the top of my head, what I feel like talking about, what's on my mind. Then from there, we do the roll call, where I call you all out as I see you, names and locations. We find out who is on the other side of the camera. Always fun to do that. Always a pleasure. We have a great audience here, good, diverse group of folks. And then from there, I answer your super chat questions or your Rumble rant questions or your Rockfin tip questions for the rest of the night. So give me something good to talk about in the second half of the program. Get me talking, get me going. That would be great. So couple announcements. Before we get going, first announcement. Next week, I will be in the Bay Area. I'm going to San Francisco for the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, where Joe Biden will meet with Xi Jinping. My credentials are approved. I will be there reporting on it for my job at RT. I'm looking forward to that. I am going to bring my streaming shit with me. I'm going to bring this microphone and that camera and this laptop with me, and my phone. And I'm going to try to do as much social media, YouTube streaming, whatever it is that I do while I'm in San Francisco. Why not, right? I'll be doing it from my hotel room, most likely, but, that is my plan at the moment, is to try to live stream when I'm not working from San Francisco. I'll try to do a couple shows at least from San Francisco. Why not, right? Why not have an opportunity to chat with all of you from the Bay Area? That would be fun. It's been a while since I've been out to the Bay Area. I went out to UC Berkeley 2017 or so to cover the protests that were happening out there against Donald Trump. I'm looking forward to being back in the Bay Area. That will be Monday through Saturday. I'm going to be in the Bay Area, San Francisco. I'm looking forward to it. I hope to, if you're from that area, maybe we'll run into each other. Just wanted to get that out there. I'm going to be in the Bay Area. Then I'm back in New York. And then after that, about a week after that, I am headed to Portland, Oregon. Great super chat. Well, I'll certainly talk about that in the second half of our show. I'm headed to Portland, Oregon, and that is for what you all may be aware of, which is the Center for Political Innovation's National Convention, which is taking place on December 2nd in Portland, Oregon. So you all already know, if you're regularly watching this show, the big name guests that we've got coming up at our convention. We've got Scott Ritter. He's booked. He's coming. Jyoti Brar, Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. She's booked. She's coming. Garland Nixon, booked, coming. David Rovics, great musician, booked, coming. Lee Stranahan, who's in the chat right now. He's coming, giving a talk about Eugene Debs. Exciting new development, which I am now at liberty to announce. We will have a poster with the face on it pretty soon. Longtime friend of mine who has been recently hosting the Jimmy Dore Show. All right, he's a good friend of mine, Craig Pasta Jardula, will be joining the opening panel at the conference. Believe it or not, I went to Nicaragua with Pasta. I've been on Convo Couch, been on multiple shows with Pasta. Pasta spoke at our CPI reception after the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and he was a speaker at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, and he came to our reception with Scott. And I just got full confirmation today that Pasta from Convo Couch, who has been hosting the Jimmy Dore Show, Pasta from the Jimmy Dore Show, Pasta from Convo Couch, he'll be there. He will be in Portland speaking at our conference. That is going to be very, very, very awesome. I am very, very excited. It is going to be an amazing, amazing conference. It's going to be an amazing, amazing conference in so many ways. Another update. So I was originally going to go to Athens next week because I was going to go to a gathering of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. People know what the World Anti-Imperialist Platform is, right? The World Anti-Imperialist Platform. Oh, I see Hempcar just sent me a chat. I'll get to you. The World Anti-Imperialist Platform is a regroupment of communist parties from around the world that support Russia and in Ukraine, support China on the issue of Taiwan, and are overall taking anti-imperialist positions. Many of the communist parties around the world have sold out and taken bad positions on the issues, but now there is this great regroupment of communist parties called the World Anti-Imperialist Platform that is forming. And our good friend, Jyoti Brar, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, is the leader of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, along with Stephen Cho, the leader of the People's Democracy Party of South Korea. Well, they're having their global gathering next week in Athens. Now, I can't go because I'm going to be in San Francisco reporting on the arrival of Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping is coming to New York, San Francisco, as I just told you, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. I'm going to be in San Francisco. Biden and Xi Jinping are going to meet in San Francisco at the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. So I'll be there reporting on that. So I won't be able to go. But our president, Elizabeth Young, the president of the Center for Political Innovation, she is headed to Athens, Greece for the gathering of the World Anti-Imperialist Platform, right? As if it's not enough for her to be scrambling around Portland trying to organize our conference. Now she is getting on a plane next week, and she is heading to Athens, Greece. And she's going to give a great speech to the gathering representing the Center for Political Innovation, putting forward our anti-imperialist views. Yes, the Socialist Party of Venezuela is part of the platform. It is the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. You can check out their website. WAP21.org is their website. You can see a number of different parties have signed the Paris Declaration. There's many different signatories. There's I'll just read them. Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist, People's Democracy Party of South Korea, Korea is One, Belgium, Baltic Platform, the Communist Party of Kyrgyzstan, the Hungarian Workers' Party, the Communist Party of Italy, the Italian Communist Party, the Communist Party of Switzerland, the Spanish Avant-Garde of Spain, Eastern Initiative of Europe, the New Communist Party of Yugoslavia, the National Association of Communists of France, the Pole of Communist Revival in France, the Chilean Communist Party Proletarian Action, the Socialist Workers' Party of Croatia, the Platform for Independence of Greece, the Communist Party of Peru, Patria Roja, Red Homeland, the collective struggle for the unification of humanity in Greece, the People's Party of Panama, the Communist Party of the People of Spain, the new Communist Party of Montenegro, the United Socialist Party of Venezuela, which is the ruling party of Venezuela, the PSUV, the PSUV, the Union Proletariat of Spain, the Rassemblement Communiste, the Communist Reassembly of France, the Lebanese Communist Party of Lebanon, the Party of Communists USA, the Mexican Communist Movement of Mexico, the dynamic unity of Pan-Africanists, 23 organizations in Africa, the Party of Communists of Kyrgyzstan, the Belarusian Communist Workers' Party, the Belarusian Republican Organization of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union of Belarus, the Center for Political Innovation of the United States, that's us, the All-Union Communist Party of Bolsheviks of Russia, the Mazdoor Kisan Party of Pakistan, right? That's the Worker and Peasant Party of Pakistan, the Communist Party of Kenya, the Communist Initiative of Spain, the Socialist Platform of Georgia, and the Communist Party of Belgium. That's all the organizations that have signed the World Anti-Imperialist Platform. And I'm really proud that the Center for Political Innovation is one of only two organizations in the United States that has signed the platform. Now, the Party of Socialism and Liberation, aka Party of Synthetic Leftism, was invited to sign it, but won't sign it because they're neutral in Ukraine, because they're punks, because they're not really anti-imperialists. And I'm sure we'll have plenty more to say about that later. But the Center for Political Innovation and the Party of Communists, we are represented. I'm honored to be talking with Elizabeth. She's going to give a great dynamic presentation about Lenin and the fight against opportunism. That's going to be really, really important. But it's going to take her away from a whole week of organizing for our conference, which, is throwing a monkey wrench in the works. Going to be stressful, but we're still doing it, right? And posters are still going up all over Portland. I'll show you some of those posters just because you need to see them, right? You need to see them. Why not? I'll show you a couple of the posters that are going up. You've seen them before, but I'll show you. Door knockers posters are going up all over Portland. Was just talking to organizers out in Seattle today about their planned work that they are doing. And about the outreach that they are planning. There's some great folks from the Seattle area that are coming, and different organizers. A couple friends of Pasta are also going to come and join us. I mean, a lot of amazing stuff is happening. I don't know. I'll show you some more of the pictures just so you can see what's going on here. Right? So we've got the posters that are going up, right? We got posters that are going up on telephone poles, right? Thanks to Christina for these pictures. There's posters on telephone poles. We've also got these fancy door knockers, right? Door knockers. They look like this, right? That's all the door knockers. And they go on people's doors like this. And it's gonna be great. So we are full speed ahead, focused on our Portland conference, and the fact that our fearless leader, our great commandante, who leads us into battle, figuratively speaking, of course, we're not fighting anybody, but figuratively speaking, into the battle of information. Our great leader, Elizabeth Young, is going to be out of commission because she'll be out of the country for a week. That means that we need you more than ever to register if you're going to go, register for the conference, and to support the conference. There's links down below. Please go ahead and register for the conference. We need you to go ahead and register if you're going to register. I'll drop the links in all the chats, but we need you to register for the conference. It is time to register for the conference. And it is time to send us a donation because we really need to get our second cameraman there. We've raised enough money. We're doing it. I mean, it's happening. The question is how smoothly. We need a second cameraman. Shout out to Peter, our second cameraman. If we can raise enough to bring him there so we have multiple cameras so Peter Coffin doesn't have to do all the video production work himself, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. And you with your pledge can help us do that. Help cover a plane ticket for our good friend Peter. Help get Peter out there and to do his work. It's going to be really, really great. So if you want to support us, you can support us that way. Let me just drop that. You'll be helping give a platform to Pasta, helping give a platform to Scott Ritter. It'll be a generally good thing to do to support the conference, right? If you can give us a cash donation, that would be great. If you can send us a contribution that way, awesome. Help this conference happen. And then on top of that, we also just need you, if you're going, right? And it is free, right? There's no cover charge. I mean, if you want to donate, fine, but there is no cover charge to get in. If you're just going to come and enjoy the show and participate in the activities, register so that we know you're coming. We might be having food, not yet determined if we're going to have food there. But we need you to go ahead and register so that we know that you are coming. The room holds 250 people, and we want to make sure to fill it. We want to fill the room. So in order to make sure we get enough food for everybody, in order to make sure there's enough space for everybody, register for the conference. Go ahead and register for the conference. Go ahead and register. Register for the conference so that we know that you are coming. If you're coming, please register. If you're a member of the CPI and you're coming, please register. We have a team of volunteers coming in from out of town to make this conference happen. And shout out to all of you in the chat who are coming in from out of town to make this conference happen. Proud to know you. Proud to know you. We are going to incorporate our participation in the World Youth Festival into the conference. We have the World Youth Festival flag. We're going to have different speeches that talk about different aspects of the World Youth Festival, why it's important to stand with Russia against the imperialists and the tradition of the World Youth Festivals, etc. It's going to be a great, exciting time. So a lot is happening right now. The global movement of anti-imperialism is on the march. People are marching with Palestine. All over the world, people are standing with Palestine. Yesterday, I went to a big Palestine rally in New York City, reported on it for RT. That was definitely a great experience. Lee Stranahan is bringing cookies to our conference. And go ahead and register. Please register so that we know you're coming. Send us a donation to help us cover the costs because, we got to put up the out-of-town guests. We're getting an Airbnb for our out-of-town volunteers. We got to get hotel rooms for our speakers and plane tickets, and we got to get our other cameraman. Shout out to Peter. We really want to get our other cameraman there so that we have multiple people there to film it and get things done. And we've gotten a lot of great support so far, and it's really helpful. And there's no question that a badass, amazing conference is happening on December 2nd. No question about it. No question about it. The question is how badass, how amazing will the conference be? Well, you can help us make it even more amazing by being there, by helping us promote, and by, on top of all of that, sending a contribution. There you go. I hope that you all will help us out, support the conference, register for the conference. Just wanted to get that out of the way. So now I'm going to get into, the meat of the show, my opening remarks. Then after that, though, as I'm speaking, I'll be taking down people's super chat, Rumble rant, Rockfin tip questions. Give me something to talk about in the second half of our show. Boom. All right. Going to get into opening remarks for tonight. Folks, I've got a lot of books behind me on this shelf. A lot of books behind me. I'm lucky. I want to say that I'm very, very, very lucky. Because my mother was a librarian. From the time I was young, I was encouraged to read. In my household, there was never any stigma on reading. In my household, there was never any notion that reading was a bad thing to do. And I was taught from a young age how to look things up in the encyclopedia. Do you remember encyclopedias? When I was a kid, we used to have an encyclopedia in the kitchen slash living room slash dining room, the big room in the center of our house. We had an encyclopedia. It was the World Book. It wasn't the Encyclopedia Britannica. It was the World Book. And often during our conversations at dinner, something would come up that we would not know about. It'd be something that my mother or father or something that my brother and I had heard about at school that we didn't know about. And it was not uncommon in my household that while we were eating dinner, my brother, my mother, my father, myself would walk over to the encyclopedia, take the encyclopedia out and look something up, consult the encyclopedia as we were eating dinner together. That happened when I was a kid, am I lucky because that happened? I mean, I don't know, right? Different cultures do things differently. When I was in Iran, I learned that, and it's just, no one explained this to me, but I learned the hard way, and this is in the documentary I made when I was in Iran, that it is considered good practice to not speak while you eat a meal in Iran. Now, I didn't know that, and so when I was with my camera crew, we'd be eating, and I would try to spark up conversation, and they would give me a quick answer, and then they would just be silent again as we're eating. And I always thought, oh, I made somebody mad. I made somebody angry. Because in my household growing up, if we were all eating and we weren't talking, there were some big problems in the household. That was not a good sign. But I found out in Iran that that is actually considered more wholesome, more religious, right? If you're more religious, you don't talk while you eat. It is considered, that if you're more religious, you don't talk while you eat. But I was not informed of this. And then once I found out that that's just how they do things in Iran, they don't talk at the same time that they are consuming food. No, we don't speak with, you obviously don't speak with your mouth full of food. That would be ridiculous. But, at the same time, it's very common in the United States. You're sitting in a restaurant, you have a conversation with your friend while you eat, right? That's pretty normal, but, in other cultures, people don't do that. There's a lot of different traditions around these kinds of things. But you see, there's a lot of books behind me, right? And, I grew up reading books. That was just part of, that was just part of, part of the household I grew up in. That was part of what I did, was that we read books. And my mother was a librarian. I spent way, way, way more hours at Orville Public Library than any human being should ever spend who doesn't work there themselves. But every day after school, I would go to the public library where my mother worked. And when I was younger, my mother used to work at the library in Perry Heights, which is near Canton, Ohio. And so I spent way more hours in that library in Perry Heights near Canton, Ohio, in Stark County, than I ever did. And any person should have. And I know my way around books. And what was painful for me as I got older was I realized that not everyone I knew had this kind of background. I remember when I was in college, there was a friend of mine, he needed help. I was helping him study or whatever, and he didn't know how to use an index. He didn't know how to use an index. He didn't know what an index was, and so I helped him, showed him how to use an index, I showed him how to, get a book and then go to the back, go into the index and look for topics. These are things that a lot of people don't know. We don't have a culture that encourages people to read, right? We don't. We have a culture that kind of, especially now with phones and stuff, people are just not encouraged to read. And I consider that to not be a good thing. I think that people reading is generally a good thing. But it's difficult. And that I've noticed for a lot of people, Like, for example, like just the way I read and the way I interact with books is different than the way most people do, right? One thing that will happen, it's happened, I learned this the hard way. I'll give somebody a book. I'll say, oh, you really ought to read this. And I'll give them a book. And so I'll come back to them 2 days later. I'll say, what'd you think of the book? And they're like, I'm only on page 3. And I'll be like, you're only on page, what are you talking about? And I realized that, I don't read books like a movie, right? With a movie, you got to start at the beginning of the movie. You got to read it all the way to the end, especially nonfiction books. I don't read them that way. I open them up. I read the parts I'm interested in. I skip through it, and if somebody gives me a book, I can usually get back to them 2 or 3 days later and say my general impression. I won't have read every word. I'll have read a little bit of the opening. I'll have read a chapter here. I'll read it. And I can say to them, well, it looks very interesting. But I learned when I was in college, when I was in high school, if I gave somebody a book, and I said to them 2 days, 3 days later, what did you think of it? They'd say, I'm only on page 3, because in their mind, it's like a movie. And to be fair, fiction books are like that. I do not read fiction. It doesn't hold my attention. If I'm doing a fiction book, it better be an audiobook, because that's the only way I'm going to stay up to date with it. I do not read fiction. For the life of me, I just don't read fiction. If I'm going to read fiction, it has to be an audiobook, and I'm cleaning my apartment, or I'm folding clothes or something while I'm reading I'm listening to the audio, or I'm walking, or I'm exercising at the gym, because there's no way that I can make my way through a fiction book. And often I'm reading a fiction book and I'm thinking like, wait, who is that again? And it's like, no, it doesn't hold my attention. Right. And with a fiction book, yes, it is like a movie. You got to just read every line, you can't skim it. So, these are things that are worth thinking about. These are things that are worth talking about. Not everyone relates to books in the same way. I wish that we had a society that was more literary. I wish we had a society that encouraged people to read more, and that that if I see people, and this is even a risk for me to talk about this on here, right? Because there's a very good chance there's a few people watching this thinking, oh, what an asshole. Look, if I see people who just don't interact with books in the same way I do, I don't think they're bad people. I don't think they're inferior to me. I mean, they can be just as smart as I am, especially now with your phone. You just look shit up on your phone. There's nothing wrong, but I do wish that people had this ability, because, I don't know, people are weird about books. I remember when I was in college, I had a bookshelf with a lot of my books that I brought from home. And I remember when I moved in with one of my roommates who was an athlete, multiple people would come to my dorm room to hang out with my roommate who was an athlete. And they would turn to me and they would say, have you read all of those books? And I would think like, yeah, like, I don't know. It was weird. But I know that they looked at the shelf and saw all the books there. And they would be like, they would think about how time consuming it would be to go through every one of them meticulously on every page. And it's like, that's not what I did with all those books on my shelf. I had Marxist books. I had, compilations. I don't know. It was just, not everyone interacts with books the same way. Books are interesting things. They're very, very interesting things. Very, very interesting things. And, books have been around a long time. Books predate the printing press. It used to be they were all handwritten. That's what scribes were for. Originally, scribes had scrolls. You see, the ancient times, they had the scrolls, right? And then after scrolls, eventually they started making books, but all the books were handwritten out. And then they figured out the printing press, and then the modern book binderies. And now we have the mass production of books. In fact, now Amazon prints on demand. Amazon prints on demand at this point. Now, Olympia, she says that she used to read encyclopedias front to back. Well, I'll tell you one thing that I used to do. Olympia, I didn't do that exactly. But one thing about my school, I went to a tiny little public school in a little tiny town in Ohio. But back when I went there, I don't know, they probably have just thrown them all away at this point. But back when I went there, they would have in every classroom a really old encyclopedia in every classroom, just sitting there, right? No one had ever bothered to throw it away. It was just there. And so, like, I remember in my health class, the encyclopedia they had was from the year of 1952. I remember in my in one of my social studies classrooms, the encyclopedia they had there was from the year of 1943, something like that. And I remember I would read old encyclopedia articles. And I would compare the old encyclopedias to the new ones. That was something I did. And I remember when I got really interested in communism, I remember getting the encyclopedia from 1952 and reading the entry about the Communist Party USA. And it was really long. In the encyclopedia there, I don't know what encyclopedia it was, but I looked for Communist Party of the United States. And there was a really long article that talked about William Z. Foster and Charles Ruthenberg and talked about the Smith Act trial where they all went to prison and talked about their platform and what they stand for and Earl Browder and how it was a really long article. Why? Well, in 1952, the Communist Party of the United States was a really big deal. I mean, they were all in prison and they were all being outlawed and the government was investigating them constantly. But it would be like, it was almost an article about, it wasn't as long, but it was almost like an article about the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, right? I remember reading that. The article about the Communist Party was really, really long. But if you get an encyclopedia from the 70s, the Communist Party USA doesn't even have an encyclopedia entry because they were not relevant at that point. But, I remember that. Also, I remember the psychology articles, and this is something I learned a lot from, right? The way I was always taught to think about social issues, social conservatism, etc. I was always taught that we're always getting gradually more liberal, right? We're always getting gradually more open-minded, gradually more liberal. Well, that's kind of true, but not exactly. Not completely, right? I remember when I would read those old encyclopedias, what they would write about contraception, what they would write about, homosexuality and stuff was very different, right? World War II, that time period, even though, yes, it was much more conservative than we are now. Obviously, people weren't talking about homosexuality openly the way they are now, and there was no gay marriage or anything like that. They would talk about sex in a very open way. They were much, and in the 50s, it got more conservative. In the 50s and 60s, it got more conservative. And then in the 70s and 80s, it got way more conservative. And then, it's actually interesting. Social liberalism is not a gradual progression. And that's one thing I learned by reading those encyclopedias. We were very, very liberal. Very, very liberal socially in the 1930s and 40s, right? In the 50s, as part of McCarthyism, there was a big kind of moral crackdown. They outlawed homosexuals working at the State Department. You had to, if you were gay, you automatically got fired from any job at the State Department because they thought you might be a communist spy if you were gay. They outlawed pornography in the 1950s. There was a wave of anti-pornography legislation, etc. And that there was kind of a socially conservative rebound in the 1950s after World War II. And then you had the Cultural Revolution of the 1960s. And then late 70s, you had the rise of the religious right and people, became more conservative. But, I will never forget, there is a movie called The Cat People, right? And you look at this. This is a movie from the 1940s. Came out during World War II, and there's a sequel called The Curse of the Cat People. But the plot of the movie, The Cat People, is that there's a woman, and every time she gets turned on, she either turns into a cat or it's not clear if she is hallucinating that she has turned into a cat. That's what the movie's about. And it's about how her sexual repression has driven her insane. That's basically the theme of the movie. You can look it up, The Cat People. A movie like that would never have been allowed in the 1950s. Even in the 60s, it would have been until the late 60s, a movie like that would have been extremely controversial. 1942, this movie, The Cat People, is basically a Freudian rant against sexual repression. That shows you that, again, politics and all of that, it's not a straight line. I learned that from reading the encyclopedias. So yeah, I remember reading encyclopedias. I don't think I ever read them cover to cover like you, Lumpia. I'm not where you're at, Lumpia, but more power to you, right? A thirst for knowledge is a healthy thing, right? When people stop learning, and that's one of my frustrations, when people stop learning or they're not interested in learning, right? That is the worst place that you can be, right? When you're not interested in doing better, when you're not interested in learning, that is an awful, awful place to be. That is a recipe for failure. That is a recipe for death. When people are not interested in learning, when people don't want to learn new things, when people are not interested in doing a better job at what they are doing, that is a recipe for disaster. And that is why I continue to be that guy who criticizes the Palestine rallies. I guess we'll just talk about that. I wasn't sure I was going to talk about that now, but it seems a lot of people watched my videos, and part of me doesn't want to be that guy. The guy who to criticize the Palestine rallies. And the reason for that is because it's refreshing. The whole Palestine situation obviously is horrendous, but what's refreshing is the political climate seems to have shifted in a way where, for once, the left is against the establishment. Let me repeat that. For once, the left, the bulk of the left, are against the establishment. It hasn't been like this since the Iraq War. Since Occupy Wall Street a little bit, but not even really with Occupy Wall Street. The left, the people who call themselves left, Democrats, people that are on the fringe of the Democratic Party, rank and file Democrats who are more radical, more liberal than Democrats, are actually at odds with the establishment. That's refreshing, okay? For the last 50 years, or not 50 years, the last 10 or 15 years, the left has just marched completely behind CNN. CNN says Black Lives Matter, and the left says Black Lives Matter. CNN says Trump works for Russia, and the left says Trump works for Russia, right? I mean, and leftist people, the Michael Moore kind of crowd, have just completely been on board with the establishment. And when it comes to war, when it comes to foreign policy, it's been voices on the right that are questioning things, and it's been the left that are just the enforcers of the establishment. And it's been a big problem as the establishment gets more woke and, adopts more inclusivity, identitarian buzzwords and diversity and all of that. And now that's not the case. Just like when the USA invaded Iraq, right? When the USA invaded Iraq, pretty much the whole American political establishment was for it. Now, there were some exceptions. Bernie Sanders, Robert Byrd, but for the most part, the bulk of the American government, from the Democrats to the Republicans, Nancy Pelosi, Hillary Clinton, they were all for invading Iraq. But most Democrats were against it, and so they went out and protested. And now we're at a time where the bulk of the American political establishment, including Bernie Sanders, including AOC, is supporting Israel's bombing of Gaza, is saying that these protests are anti-Semitic and offensive. And it's the left who are going out and doing the protesting. And they're getting canceled for it. At Harvard, they're putting their faces on trucks and doxing them. The New York Times, I understand, is trying to dox high school kids at this point who participated in a walkout. They're trying to dox a group of high school kids. That's what they were telling me. I was talking to somebody at a protest And they were telling me there were high school walkouts by Muslim American youth. And the New York Times is like trying to figure out legally how they can dox a bunch of high school kids for marching for Palestine. I mean, it's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. The amount of shaming and demonization of these protests. I mean, mainstream media, Megyn Kelly, all of them say you're a terrorist. And a lot of people are just saying, you know what? Screw it. What Israel's doing to the Palestinians is wrong. We're going to protest. A lot of them are Jews too. And a lot of Jews just say, look, not in my name. And a lot of them will say they even support Israel's right to exist. They're technically Zionists, but they don't agree with what Israel's doing. And the fact that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people are marching for Palestine right now is a good thing. Let me repeat that. The fact that thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of people are marching for Palestine right now, even though Fox News, MSNBC, all of mainstream media is saying, how dare you, you're supporting, and they're still doing it. And they're in danger of losing their jobs. They're in danger of, it's kind of amazing. So this is a good thing, and it's not fake. This is the first time that we see a trendy leftist cause that's not fake. CNN is calling you a bad person if you do it, and people are still doing it, right? Fox News is calling you a bad person if you do it, and people are still doing it. And it doesn't have the fake character that so much of the leftism has had for so long. That's a good thing. So that's kind of why, because this is, and it's communists and socialists that are marching, and they're not, canceling people, and this is amazing, right? And there's support for the Palestinians, even though the Palestinians don't believe in gay marriage, even though the Palestinians aren't chanting "We love abortion," they're still supporting the Palestinians. This is great. This is great in a lot of ways. It's amazing. It is a good thing. So before I get into my criticism, which I've already made, you saw the videos, but I'm going to explain it a little bit more. I just want to get out how amazing what's going on right now is. From an objective perspective, this is a good situation. Finally, the socialists and the communists are not just defending the Democrats from the Republicans. Finally, thousands of people are protesting when they're not being told to by CNN. That's great. Finally, the rank and file of the Democratic Party is not rallying behind the leadership of the Democratic Party. All of this is a good thing. They're standing up to cancel culture. They're still in the streets. They're withstanding persecution for doing. This is all great. Okay? But I just can't be satisfied. I just can't be satisfied. Wow. I just can't be satisfied. I just cannot be satisfied. I'm supposed to be satisfied. I'm supposed to go, hey, it's so great this is happening. Applaud. But that would not be doing my job. I don't get on these streams and just applaud things that are happening. It's not what I do. And if I were to do that, that would be called tailism. When you don't offer any political leadership, when you just applaud spontaneous eruptions against the establishment, there's a name for that. That's called tailism. And it's also called bowing to spontaneity. There has been a spontaneous upsurge against the establishment in the United States, and it's a good thing. And if all I did was applaud it and just say, great, and I'm a communist, and I support it, yay, that's all I did, I would be in dereliction of duty. And I know there's a lot of people that get mad that that's not what I do, right? They want me to just do that. And that's what almost all the communist groups are doing. The PSL, they're organizing the rallies, right? The Workers' World Party, they're applauding the rallies. Yay! And the Communist Party, yay! They're applauding the rallies. And they're just, something's happening, and it's good. There's a good development among the masses. There's a good spontaneous upsurge among the masses. And they feel like their contribution is to go, well, just so you know, we love it. And we're communists. So you all should be communists too because we love what you're doing. And that's not a winning strategy. I'm sorry. I mean, there's a whole book. There's this whole book written about why that's not a winning strategy. And I didn't write it. It was written by this guy named Vladimir Lenin. And it's called What Is to Be Done. And it's all about how you shouldn't just be a cheerleader. And you shouldn't just bow to spontaneity. And you shouldn't just tail after spontaneity and tail after trends among the masses. There's this whole book called What Is to Be Done. So, if you think I'm a bad dude for saying what I'm about to say, take it up with this guy. This guy was a worse dude than I was. He wrote a whole book saying about how spontaneous upsurges like this won't lead anywhere good unless you intervene. So I'm doing exactly what this guy said you're supposed to do. And all these communist groups are doing exactly what this guy said not to do. They are bowing to spontaneity. They're tailing after it. Well, I did spend a good 5, 15, 10 minutes telling you why it's good. Okay? So don't say I said it's bad, which is what people immediately do. The second that you criticize anything, people say, well, you're saying it's bad. No. It's overwhelmingly a good development. But I'm telling you that it has limitations. The protests are set up in a way that they accomplish two things. And these two things they accomplish are not necessarily good. The first thing that they accomplish is they send a message to the Muslim world. And don't you think that these protests are not watched very carefully overseas? And don't you think for a minute that Voice of America Arabic and Voice of America Persian and Voice of America Africa and don't you think for a minute they don't show videos of these protests all over the world? They do. And they don't have to say it. But they show these protests on Voice of America, American government propaganda. They show these protests on Voice of America. And what do they use these protests to say? Hey, guys, sure, America is giving billions of dollars to Israel to bomb and murder Palestinians, but look how inclusive America is. We've got this big crowd of Muslims here in America, and women in headscarves and Middle Eastern looking people here in America. There's room for them here in America, and they're marching and they're chanting free, free Palestine, and they've got Palestinian flags, and they're out there. Look how open and inclusive American society is. You can invest over here. You can immigrate over here. This is a great, free, open, tolerant society. That's one of the things these protests communicate. And they're designed to communicate that. Right? They are designed to communicate that. They want to subtly show these protests around the world and say, you can't have a pro-Israel rally in Iran, but you can have a pro-Palestine rally in New York City. the most Jewish city in the world. Look how free American society is. Look how great our Western system is, that we allow people that say things that our leaders disagree with. We let them march down the streets, and look, they're dressed in their traditional garb and they're chanting in Arabic, and we're a free, open society. That is exactly what these protests are used to communicate. And is that a message that helps anti-imperialism? I don't think so. What is the second thing that these protests communicate? Not what they communicate overseas, what they communicate here. When people who are not communists and people who are not Muslim see crowds of people in Islamic garb with Palestine flags chanting, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. From the sea to the river, From the sea to the river, Palestine will live forever." When they hear that, what they see is a group of foreign people who look really angry, who have nothing to do with them. That's what most Americans see when they see that crowd. Most average working class Americans who are not Muslim, who are not communists and leftists, they see that crowd going by, and they see a bunch of foreign-looking folks chanting often in a foreign language with a foreign flag who look really angry. And some of them have been psyched up with anti-Islamic bigotry, and it makes them scared. And they say, "Oh my God, look, there's all these angry, hateful Muslims. I should support the government more." And some of them look at that and they say, "This has nothing to do with me." And some of them look at that and they say, what in the world does this have to do with anything? And why doesn't anyone care about me and my community, right? I'm struggling to pay my bills, but I'm not Palestine, so these people don't care about. And it reinforces the alienation, hostility, pro-imperialist sentiments of the bulk of the population. They look at this, they say a bunch of angry Arabs and a bunch of terrorist supporters are out there chanting and breaking things and burning things, and they look the other way. At best, they are not affected by it, and at worst, it reinforces their bigotry. Okay? Now, what good do these protests do? They put on the record that there's a lot of people who don't agree with the American government supporting Israel. That is good. That is the good thing that they accomplished. And that is why they're a positive development. And that alone, that makes them worth having. They do more good than harm because of that. Because of the fact that amid all the other problems, what they communicate to the American government is that there are people who disagree with them. What they communicate to the public is that there are people who disagree with them. It is a way of putting it on the record that while the U.S. government and the U.S. media and all the politicians support Israel, there's a group of people who very solidly don't, and they so much don't that they've gotten to the streets. So that's good. But other than that, it doesn't really help. It just, helps reinforce the idea that the USA is a happy land of freedom, and that Muslims should come here, Muslims should do business here, Muslim countries should have a relationship with the United States, because even though the USA is in bed with Israel, it's still so open and tolerant. And number two, it alienates and reinforces the bigotry of average Americans, people that aren't Muslim, people that aren't communists. Now, I am not going to tell anybody else. Let me rephrase that. I am not going to tell anyone who's not white how they should protest. All right? If you're not white, look, if you're in the black community, if you want to organize in a way that you think is best for the black community, I'm a white dude. I'm not telling you how to organize. Same for Arab Americans. If you're an Arab and you want to organize the way you do, and you want to do that, I'm not going to tell you how to organize Arab Americans. Brian Becker is not an Arab. Let me repeat that. Brian Becker is not an Arab. Sarah Flounders is not an Arab. Okay? The people who stage manage these rallies are not Arabs. The Answer Coalition, Act Now to Stop War, his name is not Abdul Brahim Becker bin Beckerin. His name is Brian Becker. Okay? And Brian Becker is not an Arab. All right? And the people who run these rallies are not Arabs. The people who get the permits are not Arabs. The people who run the protests and get the permits and set up the stage, and Sarah Flounders of the International Action Center is not an Arab. Brian Becker is not an Arab. Right? Sherry Wolf of the ISO is not an Arab. Right? Susan Sarandon, who was at the rally I was at, she is not an Arab. Right? And these people stage manage these rallies. Okay? I mean, Susan Sarandon, I just threw her name in there. I don't have any beef with her. I don't know anything about where she stands on this kind of thing. Just she's a celebrity who happens to not be an Arab. But the thing is, I want to win. I want to win. Let me emphasize this. I want to win. I am not satisfied with 15 Palestinians dying every hour and my tax money paying for it. I'm not satisfied with that. Brian Becker wants me to be satisfied with that. Brian Becker sits there and says, sure, the killing continues, death continues, but you know what? I organized a great rally. In fact, Brian Becker even said to the New York Times that he didn't really want to stop the Iraq War. He just wanted to radicalize people and get people into a lifestyle of activism. That was classic. I mean, that's a New York Times article. I can send you the New York Times quote, right? New York Times, 2009, Brian Becker. I will pull it up, right? He actually said that. What was it, 2010 maybe? I will show you the quote from Brian Becker. Where he actually said he doesn't want to stop the war. He just wants to radicalize people. And that was I mean, that was amazing. That was something else. I've tweeted out the screenshot of it before. Folks, if we want to actually stop the war, if we want the bombing of Gaza to actually stop, we have to get millions and millions and millions of Americans who are not political on board. And that means we need to appeal to their interests. And right now, these people, look at the polls. They are against it. Polls show, even though the leadership of the Republican Party is overwhelmingly for this, even though the leadership of the Democratic Party is for this, polls show a very big percentage of Americans are saying, no, why should we be spending all this money on Israel? We need to be mobilizing those Americans. And that would mean appealing to them and saying money for jobs and schools in this country, not for Israel. That would mean saying, why do we not have health care for Americans? And these Republicans are so against having national health care for Americans, but we pay for Israel to give free health care to all of their citizens. What's going on with that? Right? Nikki Haley says she's against Medicare for all. No, we can't have the government give people health care. But she's happy to give billions of dollars to Israel so that they can give their people health care. These are the kinds of demands we need to raise. Money for jobs in America, money to build roads in America, money for high-speed railway in America, not bombs and drones for Israel. That should be the rallying cry. We should make clear to the American people that every bomb and every drone and every missile that is sent to Israel, every single one, is money that could have been spent in their neighborhood, in their community, hiring teachers for the schools that their kids go to, providing jobs. That needs to be the message. This is our money that is being used to commit mass murder in Gaza. And America is falling apart. And it would be in the interests of the American working class to cut off aid to Israel and use that money to provide resources for the parts of America that are crumbling. That should be the message. Furthermore, what is another issue that is rallying Americans right now? The police state. Well, Israel trains the police of America. Did you know this? Israel trains the police of the United States. The police of America all go to Israel to get training, and it's a way to subsidize the Israeli military. And if you're mad about police brutality in the United States, you should be mad about Israel, because Israel is the Harvard of police brutality. It's where cops go to learn to be brutal. The Israeli cops train the American cops. Furthermore, right? You want to talk about surveillance? They actually contract, and you can look this up, it's been revealed. The Mossad, the Israeli intelligence service, is hired by the NSA to spy on Americans. So if you're worried about the police state, government surveillance, police brutality, government repression, Israel is highly involved in it. Our American government hires the Israeli government to spy on us. Did you know that? Our American government hires the Israeli government to spy on us. I mean, it's like everything that Americans are mad about. The infrastructure falling apart, that's because they're spending the money on Israel. The police brutalizing people, that's because the police are trained in Israel. The violations of our civil liberties, well, they're contracting Israeli companies to do it. I'm just telling you, and look into the Epstein case. That's all I'm going to say there. Look into that Jeffrey Epstein case. Look into the details of what's going on there. You don't need QAnon and some fancy story about satanic pedophile rings. Look at the Epstein case. Just look at the Epstein case. That's all I'm saying, right? Dig into the facts, the actual facts about the Epstein case. Look at what's going on there. There should be millions of non-communist, non-Muslim Americans coming to these rallies. Americans want jobs in their neighborhood. Americans want paved roads in their neighborhood. Americans want schools in their neighborhood. Americans want health care for their own selves, not to pay for Israel to have it. Americans want an end to police brutality. Americans want the government to not be spying on them. Well, Israel is the reason for all of those things. And that is what out of the movement to the masses is all about. If these rallies really started having an impact, they'd be full of American flags. The lead banner would say, money for jobs and schools in America, not weapons for Israel. And you know who's been saying this for the longest time? The Palestinians. Let me repeat that. The Palestinians have been saying to Americans, why don't you organize this way? For the longest time. I was in Cleveland, the Arab American Coalition. They were constantly saying, why don't we organize a protest this way? And the woke left, we leftists were always saying, no, we can't do that. You know, when I would go to the Middle East, I would talk to people in Iran. They would say, Caleb, why don't you organize protests this way? And I would say, well, we can't do that. And then finally, I just kind of woke up and I said, actually, yeah, we can. You go to Cuba, they say, why don't you organize protests this way? You go to Venezuela, they say, why don't you organize protests this way? You go to Russia, they say, why don't you organize protests this way? And then you get back over here and they say, well, no, we can't do that. We can't organize protests like that. Caleb, the American flag is a racist symbol. It's a racist settler thing. I don't think that, you know, when I go to communist youth festivals, they generally assign an American flag to the American delegation. You know, people around the world think it's perfectly natural for people in America to wave American flags. They also think it's perfectly natural for people in America who are supporting Palestine to argue that supporting Israel is bad for America. People around the world, it's just kind of basic, right? If you're trying to organize people in Brazil to oppose sending money to Israel, you tell them that Israel is bad for Brazil. If you're trying to organize people in Zimbabwe to oppose sending money to Israel, you tell them that Israel is bad for Zimbabwe. However, in America, if you're organizing to not send money to Israel, you chant, "Settler go home, settlers go home." You know, I mean, there's something deeply wrong here. There's something deeply, deeply wrong here. Okay? And I have a whole rant that I'm not going to do tonight, but the reason CPI was formed is because something is deeply wrong here. There's a deep problem with American communists, okay? They won't do what is common sense. It is just basic common sense right now. In this political atmosphere, the message of the rallies should be money for jobs, not for Israel. The message of the rallies should be Israel is involved in American political repression. Why does Israel have free health care for its population when we don't have it over here and we're funding them? That should be the message. And instead, the message that I get from a lot of these protests is white people are bad. Israel, they're a bunch of white settlers, and they're bad white settlers just like Americans are. Israel's evil, so is America. It's a Western racist settler country. That is not a winning message in America. You know, if you're running for president of Brazil, you don't say fuck Brazil. You're running for president of Zimbabwe, you don't say fuck Zimbabwe. And if you're running for president of America, you don't say fuck America. But that's what American communists do. And it's idiotic. And it's stupid. And it doesn't make any sense. And it's dumb. But that's what American communists do because they don't ever think they can win. Because America is an anti-communist country, but they don't fit in with that American stuff. I don't consider myself an American. I'm an ally of the international proletariat. All the other Americans, they're all a bunch of brainwashed sheep, but I'm a communist. That's right. I'm better than everybody. No. Get over it, okay? Out of the movement to the masses means go to the masses. It means have a message that could actually win. And if the Palestine movement was actually making these kinds of arguments in a visible way, I mean, I know these things get said over microphones, but they get said at rallies with a lot of Palestinian flags, with a lot of people, those messages are there, but they are drowned out by an atmosphere of something that looks to most people like a hostile foreign mob. Okay? And, I said this, I made my video, and I said it yesterday, and I'm saying it again. And in response to my video, no one made an argument in response to what I said that wasn't just emotional. Someone said to me, Caleb, why don't you just go back to Ohio and organize your rallies like that? New York City's an immigrant city. Well, I've been to Palestine rallies in Ohio, and they look exactly the same. And there's plenty of non-immigrants in New York City. And that's not the point. It's not the point. The point is to win. The point is to make an appeal that could win over the bulk of the population. And somebody else said, Caleb's saying it's bad for Muslim people to be allowed to exist in America. That is not what I said. Not at all. Not at all. That's not what I said. The majority of Muslims in America are black. Did you know that? The majority of Muslims in America are African Americans, not Arabs. You know, and Arabs should be allowed to have their culture, wave their flag, be who they are. And so should black people. And so should Persians. And so should people from Pakistan. That's not what I said. What I said was, if we want to win, we should cultivate a message that will appeal to the bulk of the population. The anger and resentment that the bulk of the American people have right now against the political establishment should be hijacked to serve the purpose of stopping the killing of the Palestinians. But that the Palestine protests are organized in a way that is specifically designed not to serve that purpose. The Palestine protests are designed to serve propaganda purposes for American imperialism. Number one, to show that, oh, look how inclusive we are. And they're designed in order to alienate most Americans, to look scary and hostile and foreign to most Americans. That's the purpose that they're organized. Look, and I've seen this over and over and over again, not just around the Palestine issue. Great example of this, Syria. All right, the Syrian civil war was happening. And I was, we in the Workers' World Party, Freedom Road Socialist Organization, PSL, we supported the Syrian government, which most of the communist groups didn't even do that. Most of the communist groups were on the side of the American government against the Syrian government. They were saying down with Assad. Well, there was a small minority of communist groups in America, PSL, Workers' World, the Tankies, Freedom Road, and we supported Assad, which was the correct position. We supported the Ba'athist Arab Socialist government of Syria. But the Syrian Americans, a lot of Syrian Americans, especially Syrian American Christians, they supported the Syrian government because they didn't want to all be killed. You go to Allentown, New Jersey, or was it Allentown, Pennsylvania, I think. Is it New Jersey? No, it's Allentown, Pennsylvania. You go to Allentown, Pennsylvania, there's a lot of Syrians, a lot of Syrian doctors, a lot of Syrian families that support the Syrian government. And they were saying, talk about the fact that the USA is funding Al-Qaeda. Talk about the fact that the USA is funding Al-Qaeda. Americans don't like terrorism. America was victimized by 9/11. Well, the people that the American government is giving guns to right now in Syria, the Al-Nusra Front, Al-Sham, that's Al-Qaeda. Wahhabis. Talk about that. Yeah, see? And here you go again. That's just a lie. That's just a lie. Right? And that's this like emotional reaction. Yes, I'm opposed to Muslims existing. That's not what I'm saying at all. Right? But I want you all to see this. This is how the synthetic left lies. Right? I've made movies in Iran. Right? I'm literally wearing an Islamic kek ring on my finger. But this lying sack of shit is telling you all that I think Muslims shouldn't exist, that they shouldn't be at protests. Yes, I'm going to ban all Muslims from protests. Look at this, right? This is what they do, right? I want you all to see this. I usually don't react to people in the chat like this, but this is classic. This is classic, right? Yes, that's what I'm saying. Whites only at the rallies, Lee. That's what I'm saying. Whites only at the rallies. Whites and Christians only at the rallies. I'm going to ban all Muslims from Palestine protests. See how they lie? See how these woke pieces of shit lie like this? Anyway, I digress. But anyway, the Syrian Christians, Syrian Muslims were saying, talk about the fact that Al-Qaeda is who the USA is backing. Talk about it. And I remember, and I sat in the meeting, And I was in the meeting where Sarah Flounders and Joe Eisbacher said, oh, no, we can't do that. That's Islamophobic. And told the white people, told the Muslims that we can't say that the USA is backing Al-Qaeda in Syria because that's Islamophobic. And that moment, I remember sitting there going, what? The USA is literally backing Al-Qaeda right now in Syria. It's backing people that, were tied to Osama bin Laden to overthrow a socialist government. And we're not allowed to say that because that's Islamophobic. And that was a moment where I'm just like, what in the world is going on here? Right? What in the world is going on here? How is it Islamophobic to point out that the U.S. government is funding Al-Qaeda in Syria? And then this was a classic moment, right? Where I'm watching RT and I'm talking to the Syrians. Many times I interviewed Bashar al-Jafari, the Syrian UN representative. And one thing that was going on in Syria was that Christians, because Christians were supporting Bashar al-Assad, right? Which they were, because Assad stood for a secular government, and the people trying to overthrow Assad were Wahhabis who wanted to exterminate or forcibly expel the Christians from Syria. There were many massacres of Christians in Syria during the Syrian civil war. And so I gave a radio interview. I'll never forget this. I gave a radio interview. And I said, as somebody who grew up in a Christian church, I'm disturbed that the U.S. government is backing these terrorists who just go into churches and kill people, and they massacre people in churches. And I remember I was called up and yelled at in the Workers' World Party for saying that, because we don't want to create sympathy for Christians. Because the USA likes to create sympathy for Christians to demonize Muslims. And it's funny because that's not what the Syrian government said. And that's not what a lot of the Muslims in the Syrian government said. But no, we can't create sympathy for Christians. And again, I was in that moment like, you do realize the bulk of the American population are Christian. And the U.S. government is backing a group of Wahhabi extremists who are trying to kill Christians. So wouldn't it be common sense to point out to the bulk of the American population who are Christian that the people trying to overthrow the Syrian government are massacring other Christians? Wouldn't that be strategic? No, we can't appeal to Christians. That's right wing. Look, the Syrians wanted to appeal to Christians. The Syrians wanted to point out that the USA was backing terrorism, but the stupid woke leftists won't do that. Look, there is government infiltration, okay? First of all, there's straight up government infiltration, right? There are FBI plants in the top of these communist groups, right? There's no other way to explain how ineffective they are. And I mean, they have huge programs, there's that. Number two, right, is that there is this fear. And I'll tell you, this is the greatest fear. The greatest fear that Brian Becker has. The greatest fear that Sarah Flounders has. The greatest fear that, what's his name, the guy, Joe Sims of the CPUSA actually has. is that their organization would actually grow. And I mean, that's hard for people to comprehend. And I'm trying not to get too fired up about it on here, but the greatest fear those people actually have is that millions of working class Americans would join their organization, that their organization would blossom and expand, and they would lose control over it. That's what they fear. More than they fear government repression, more than they fear, the group fading away, which most of these groups are doing. They're afraid that their organization would actually grow and they couldn't be the boss anymore. And so they work very hard to make sure that the group functions in a way that it never has a mass base or a mass following. It never expands its influence among the population. Look, that would be the worst nightmare. Could you imagine if PSL started recruiting millions of people and all of a sudden there were millions of new members of PSL and they were doing things and Brian couldn't be in charge of it and they were not listening to, and they voted him out, and that would be their worst nightmare, right? The worst, it keeps them up late at night. They're terrified that socialism could actually become popular because then they wouldn't be the king of it anymore. They wouldn't be the boss, right? That's what they're really afraid of. It is really sad, okay? And that is the whole reason. I'm just using this to illustrate the whole reason that CPI was formed. The whole reason that CPI was formed. The whole reason that CPI was formed is because we have to break with these people. There's no other, you can't compromise with them. You can't join their groups and try to make them better from within. It's broken. These groups are completely broken. These groups are rigged. They are designed to never win over the masses of people. They are money-making operations. They are protest hustles. They are scams, right? It is designed to snag 19 and 20-year-olds. It's supposed to be a postgraduate phase, right? An undergraduate phase. While you're in college, you join one of these groups and you work your butt off and you help organize the protests that help them bring in the money. And then when you get old enough to leave college, about that time, you also realize, oh, this group isn't ever really going to grow. It's never actually going to expand. And so you hate communism and you walk away. And that's what these groups do. And it's disgusting because if you go to any country where communists actually have a base among the population, it is not a postgraduate phase. It's groups that have real roots in communities. They run labor unions. They run community associations, unemployment councils. They have members of parliament elected. And these groups are designed not to do that. These groups are designed, they are postgraduate, undergraduate hustles, okay? And CPI was formed because you cannot, I spent 8 years in one of these groups trying to figure out how I could get it to grow and trying my hardest. And I was under the illusion, I thought, well, maybe the leaders will all just die off or no. Like you have to just break with them. You have to just break with them. Let me reemphasize this. You have to just break with them. And David Fox is older than I am, and he's been living it his whole life, and he understands exactly what I'm saying, right? They're not going to get better. They're not going to improve. You just have to walk away. You just have to say, we're done playing ball with you. We're doing our own thing now. We don't care what you're doing. And that said, if all I did was get on here and bitch and moan about how bad the Palestine rallies was, you would have every right to say, Caleb, you're full of shit. And I would be. Because I'm telling you that when you're on the highway and somebody in front of you is driving very slowly, you don't just drive behind them honking your horn. What do? You go around them. And that's what we're doing with CPI. We're going around them. Portland, Oregon, December 2nd, we are having our national convention. However, 2 days beforehand in Portland, Oregon, we are having our own Palestine rally with American flags, with Palestinian flags, and with a big banner that says, money for schools and jobs in America, not weapons for Israel. We have already ordered the banner. Peter Coffin's going to be there to film it for his documentary he's making. I've got a bunch of American flags, got a bunch of Palestinian flags, and we are going to take this to the center of Portland, the center of woke land, where they do support the Palestinians, which is good. And we are going to have our own Palestine protest, and we're going to do it the CPI way. We're going to do it in a way that's aimed not at other woke people, but at average Americans. We're going to do it our way, right? You can do it your way. I'm not stopping you from doing it your way, but I'm seeing that it could be much more effective if we did it our way, and we'll do it our way because we have a responsibility. We're about to have a whole conference that'll have rhetoric that is framed our way. We're doing it our way. We're not just complaining about how other people do it. We're going to do it our way because it's about time somebody did. And that's the whole story of the Center for Political Innovation is we did it our way. All right? We saw that other people weren't going to do it right. And so we did it our way. And for a small group, all right, CPI, we have about 100, and I think somebody new joined today, 128 members, new member today signed up. We get new members all the time. We're 128 members, but for a group of 128 people, let me just quickly remind you of what we've accomplished. Our last big, or the big conference we did last year, last August, was mentioned in Newsweek. Newsweek, Center for Political Innovation. Our last big conference was mentioned in Newsweek. We got mentioned in Newsweek. There's that. We did a conference in Austin, Texas. We did a conference in Austin, Texas. Right? Where we displayed the Z and the Soviet flag. And the website trutherfiction.com had to run an article after it got so many thousands of shares. They had to do an article debunking that it was not an internet hoax. All right, I'll link that. Trutherfiction.com, Soviet flags in Texas. So many people saw the image of us having our rally in Austin, Texas, that trutherfiction.com had to run this article making clear that it actually happened. It actually happened. Yeah, it was amazing. Utterly amazing. Right? Yeah. What else? What else did we do? What else have we done? Well, I confronted Tsai Ing-wen. That went viral in China. I mean, I could sit here and name off all of our achievements. I could name off all of our achievements, right? We printed the Green Book. We have the top selling version of the Green Book. I mean, for a really, really small group, for a very, very small group, we have accomplished miracles as an organization. Yeah, we were mentioned in a speech by Nicolas Maduro. That happened, right? Here, why don't I just put the video on? I'll just put the video on. This is a video where our president, Elizabeth Young, is just kind of going over our achievements. And for a really, really small group, we've done a damn lot, right? We had a rally that was mentioned by Maduro. We sent a delegation to Nicaragua for the elections. Yeah, but I'll just put this quick video on, right? I'll just show you, like, what we've accomplished is, like, we've moved mountains, right? So let me just put this video on, right? Oh, here it is. Here it is. All right. Here it is.
The CPI a year or so ago, the 4-point program made a lot of sense. Mass mobilization to rebuild the country, public control of banking, public ownership of natural resources, Economic Bill of Rights by Roosevelt? You don't need to be a communist to agree to them.
The protest was held in Times Square in New York City, and Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, mentioned it in a speech several hours after it happened.
Hoy ya en Estados Unidos hubo la primera marcha, la primera movilización en Nueva York. Allá.
I'm speaking on behalf of the Center for Political Innovation. I was sent here on behalf of Caleb Maupin.
The March 2022 conference featured a number of prominent social media personalities and was packed full of people. The website trutherfiction.com had to put up a page clarifying that the anti-imperialist gathering featuring the Soviet flag, the US flag, and the flag of the Donetsk People's Republic was indeed real and not an internet hoax. It's our own edition of the Green Book by Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The CPI edition is the top-selling and top-rated version of the book on Amazon, and over 2,000 copies have been sold or distributed. CPI published the book Kamala Harris and the Future of America, an investigation into the woman who became the U.S. Vice President, which included her background and psychological profile. The book was widely reviewed in not only U.S. publications, but in print magazines in the UK and India. One of the main organizations that has worked against the Center for Political Innovation is the Communist Party USA. Ironically, CPI largely does the kind of educational work that the Communist Party fails to do. It is a well-documented historical fact that the Communist Party USA has been under the complete control of the FBI since at least 1958, if not earlier. Boris Child is a top FBI informant inside the Communist Party National Board, received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his work controlling the Communist Party and using it to feed disinformation to the Soviet Union. CPI maintains that it is necessary to reinvent socialism and pull away from these forces. As Lenin said, we seek to go lower and deeper to the real masses. One point must also be made on behalf of the board of directors, and this is that Caleb Maupin is our ideological leader. CPI is the result of Caleb Maupin's vision for building an organization, and we recognize his unique approach to building 21st century socialism. Though CPI is much more than any one personality, we don't take for granted his pioneering efforts in understanding and applying Marxism, Leninism, anti-imperialism, and even Christianity. His place as our ideological leader and visionary shouldn't be understated, and we are proud that he has this place in our organization. Thanks, Caleb. If you feel you have a contribution to make, please join our organization. We will do our best to connect you immediately and put you to work. We want you to have a voice, and we want to empower you.
All right. That's us, you know, and we're doing it. And our approach, the fact that our approach has gotten so much traction so quickly, right? I mean, we're a small organization, but we've accomplished so much. And I mean, there's been so much that's happened since then, right? I mean, with, you know, confronting Sawing Win and, you know, I mean, wow. I mean, there's just been so much that's happened since then even. You know, CPI is really, really something special. So, you know, we just got to do it, right? At the end of the day, right? As much as I want to complain and, you know, complain about other socialist groups and stuff, you just got to do it, right? We're just going to do it ourselves, right? At the end of the day, that's really the only answer. Go do it yourself. Go do it yourself. So that's what we're going to do. You want to get something done, you got to do it yourself. Well, that's what we're doing. Not waiting for anybody else. We're not waiting for Brian Becker. We're not waiting for Bob Avakian. We're not waiting for Christmas. We're not waiting for New Year's. We're getting it done. We're getting it done. We're getting it done. And we're getting it done in December, actually. December, we're having a big conference. So be there. Be there. Come support us in December. Right? Be there. Be there. And it'll be great. It'll be awesome. Be there. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be awesome. Register for the conference. Support the conference. All right, folks. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Get her done, says Funky. Names and locations. We're already winning. Damn right we are, Gabby. Damn right. Great job, guys. Thank you, Wolf Wolf. We got shit to do, and we are doing it. Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? We got, and another super chat. You're on the list. Kirby in Chattanooga. Welcome, Kirby. Rice in Adelaide, Australia. Mop and Dime in Scotland. John McCarthy in Chicago. Nate in Chicago. Brendan in Palo Alto. JT24 in Mississippi. Chairman Meow in Arizona. Gabby in Chicago. Patch in Arizona. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sergio in South Central Los Angeles. Welcome, Sergio. Kiwi Dave in New Zealand. Balthazar in Oakland. David Fox in Bendigo, Australia. Katusha in Belarus. Mariah in North Carolina. Mark Jones in Utica. Eli in Chicago. Corpus Christi, Texas. The Pan American. Gonzalo is with us. Jamie in St. Paul. Patrick in Maine, Northern Michigan. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I want to scroll up. Did someone say something about the, I like the Moppin cartoon on the thumbnail. That was actually made by a CPUSA member who is like trying to attack me and Peter Coffin. And he made this like poster. And so I cut it from the poster and now I use it for my own ends. So yeah, I like it too. Bob Troy in New York, Anthony in Detroit, Shoney in Los Angeles. All right. Jamie in St. Paul, Patrick in Maine, Northern Michigan. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. Anthony in Fort Worth. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Names and locations, folks. Names and locations. If you got more super chats or Rumble rants or Rockfin tips, I see there's a couple Rockfin tips have come in today from Hempcar. So those will be first, and then Rumble rant, and then there's no Rumble rants yet, but then super chats. Chris in Salt Lake City is with us. Welcome, Chris. Good to have you. Good to have you. Everyone hit the like button. Make sure that you're subscribed. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notifications bell. Very, very good. Nice touch, Caleb. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, as Elvis Presley used to say. All right. All right. Any more names and locations? Names and locations. All right. So I will answer Hempcar. Mr. Hempcar said, if you have not met with the Israeli peace movement, you should, so that you can play a part in the historic effort to establish broad and deep peace between the two Semitic people. The exchange should be videotaped widely and distributed to further the cause of peace and to witness Abraham Foxman dialoguing with his customary lines that evade the issues. I don't know what that's a reference to. The fact that there are people in Israel that object to how the Palestinians are being treated, that's important, right? And that there is an Israeli peace movement. There are people in Israel that don't agree with what Israel does. And Netanyahu is very controversial. There's division in Israel right now, and that's something to keep in mind. I don't exactly know how you want me to respond to that, Hempcar. But you also said, evidently no meeting was too small, no group was too insignificant to escape their attention. It seemed like to matter whether the politics of these Americans were legal. The participants were known or obscure. The FBI created indexes and targeted many Americans for special harassment. He's talking about COINTELPRO. Exactly. The amount of government meddling in left-wing politics. Socialist and communist groups in America are completely riddled with agents and informants and manipulated, and you bet they are. You bet they are. So thank you for sharing that quote, Hempcar. We do thank you for your super chats. So there we go. There we go. All righty. And on the Rumble, we got a couple people on the Rumble. We got Jacob in Wisconsin. And I think that's all the names on the Rumble. But if anyone has any more super chats, Rumble rants, Rockfin tips, send them my way. Give me something to react to. We got 3 super chats to react to here. But if you have any more, please keep me talking. Give me more to talk about. I'm on here to answer your questions. We got Randy from Trinidad. We got Herb Bryant in Florida. Right. But there we go. All right. John McCarthy. Dennis Kucinich just launched a new peace organization. It's time to take the side of peace. act.kucinich.com. Well, I've always been a big fan of Dennis Kucinich. He was a great political leader in Cleveland who worked. I mean, everybody voted for Dennis Kucinich. When I lived on the west side of Cleveland, the west side suburbs of Cleveland, he was wildly popular because he took care of people. Even Republicans voted for him, even though he was a far left guy, labor union, peace activist, kind of a hippie. Everybody voted for Dennis because he took care of people. Right. I knew people who were losing their homes. They called up Dennis's office and he negotiated with the bank and renegotiated their loan and prevented their home from being foreclosed on. That's one thing that Dennis Kucinich did. He was loved. Dennis Kucinich was loved. He was absolutely loved. I talked about this on these streams before, but he's an Eastern European guy, Kucinich, right? He's kind of short. He looks kind of like it's funny. He's not Irish, but he looks kind of like a leprechaun in a way. He's got a smile on his face and he's short and, but he is a very, very personable guy, very friendly, a very charismatic speaker. I mean, if you see him, he really knows how to hold a crowd, and his politics are left-wing and progressive. He's pro-labor union. He's anti-war. He's more pro-Palestine than the people who ran his office was. When I was in Cleveland, the leader of the Communist Party, Rick Nagin, was the guy who was the staffer who ran Dennis Kucinich's office. And Rick Nagin was a Zionist. And Rick Nagin supported Israel. So the guy who ran Dennis's office wouldn't let the Palestine groups meet there. So Dennis would drive to another part of Cleveland to meet with the Palestine activists. Dennis was more anti-imperialist than the communist who ran his office was. Rick Nagin was pro-Israel, but Dennis was not. That's how amazing Dennis Kucinich was. And yes, they did. They gerrymandered his district. It was awful. They really tried to get him out, of office. And it was a shame. And Dennis Kucinich he is a great guy. He was mayor of Cleveland when he was really, really young, and he wouldn't privatize the power company. And because he wouldn't privatize it, the banks stopped lending money to the city, and the city went bankrupt. It was awful. And so then he got involved in protesting against nuclear power and nuclear weapons in the 80s, and he ended up in Congress. And yeah, he's a good person. Dennis Kucinich is a great, great guy in many, many ways. I know Marianne Williamson is his good friend, and that she goes over to his house. And I understand that he used to be Roman Catholic, but now I believe, if I'm not mistaken, let me Google this and make sure. Dennis Kucinich, I think he's into Course in Miracles, which is that what he's into? I think he is. I could be wrong. That's like some kind of spiritual movement. It's like a book you can buy, Course in Miracles. Yeah, I was right. Dennis Kucinich is into Course in Miracles, which is this weird, religious book that Marianne Williamson also promotes. Yeah, I don't quite understand what it is, but it's like a spiritual book that was published. Course in Miracles. Marianne Williamson promotes it, and I think Dennis is into that. He's into like New Age stuff, right? He's kind of a New Age guy. They made a big deal out of the UFO thing when he ran for president. Like, he and his ex-wife said they saw a UFO together at one point. It's like, who cares? It's like, so like that just, there was something in the sky. They didn't know what it was. Doesn't mean they saw an alien. So, she wrote it. Did Marianne Williamson write Course in Miracles? Are you sure? I thought it was somebody else. Course in Miracles. Did Marianne Williamson write it? Course in Miracles. Did Marianne Williamson write that? I could swear somebody else wrote that. Right? It was written by Helen Schuckman. Yeah. Its largest growth in sales came after Marianne Williamson promoted it in 1992 on the Oprah Winfrey show. But she didn't write it. No, Helen Schuckman wrote it. Helen Schuckman. I don't know who Helen Schuckman was. There's a lot of this. That's a whole nother conversation we can have sometime. There's some things I just don't know much about, but I learned more about. I am a guy that likes to learn. There was a guy in Cleveland. Funky gives it has the Funky endorsement. So I don't know much about the book, but If they attack you, then it's because you're doing something right. Cuba, DPRK, Russia, and China, and now CPI are getting smeared. Well, is there a new smear I'm not aware of? We've been smeared so many times at this point. I actually, in a way, it was like, get it over with, right? I thought they had hit me with everything they could possibly hit me with, and then they hit me with an even nastier thing, and we still survived that. So, it's like, get it over with. Now there's nothing new like they can hit us with. Now everything they hit us with is going to be old, or it's going to be completely made up. Because they have scraped the barrel. They have dug into everything. Thank you. They have dug into everything about me personally and our organization that they could possibly hit us with, and we're still here. So there you go. I'm not too worried at this point. I'm actually kind of relieved. You know what I mean? But the other thing is, this is side note. Okay, I'm using this to make a bigger point. So we're gonna. What do they call it? What do they call that? We're gonna diverge. We're gonna digress. There's gonna be a digression, a derail here for a moment. Christmas time is coming up. And in Christmas time, right? You go into stores, especially like restaurants, like evening restaurants in wintertime, they put it on. They put on "Oh Christmas Tree." Oh, Christmas tree, right? And whenever I hear "Oh, Christmas tree," what do I think? I think, the people's flag is deepest red. It shrouded off our martyr dead. And ere their limbs grew stiff and cold, our hearts blood-eyed its every fold. Then raised the scarlet standard high. Within its shade we live and die. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here. I'll put that song on later. I'll download it and put it on later. But that's the anthem of socialism in Britain. That's like the socialist anthem. And it's to the tune of "Oh Christmas Tree." Originally, it was written by an Irish guy, and he wrote it to a completely different tune. But in Britain and in many parts of the world, I think Australia too, if I'm not mistaken, maybe David Fox can correct us, that is just kind of the anthem of social democracy, right? Is the red flag. And it was written when Marxism was rising and such. And what does it say? It says, though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here, right? Meaning that, some people sell out because and some people turn into backstabbers, and some people just get afraid and run away. But we're loyal. We're loyal to the cause. Though cowards flinch and traitors sneer, we'll keep the red flag flying here. And it's good, it's good to know who the traitors are, right? Because then not to work with them, right? The people who betrayed me were gonna betray me. It was only a matter of time, and it's good that they all did it once. And the cowards too. There were also some cowards who, they weren't the ones who betrayed me, but then they saw that we got attacked, and they just couldn't possibly, oh my God, we're being attacked. Oh, I better run away. Well, good, be gone. Don't let the door hit you on the way out, because now we're way stronger than we used to. Yes, they did use it here in Australia for many years. Okay, very good. Very good. So there you go. All right. Well, before we keep going, we are, and I see there's a new, I guess I'll answer this next Rockfin tip from Hempcar. He says, see HR 2977, Kucinich drafted. Also, the church committee proved this would let the nation. The CIA's relationship with the academic community are extensive and serve many purposes, and collaboration and research. Yes, exactly. Academia, the Ford Foundation, they pay for CIA stuff. I mean, that's, grant money and deciding what academics get their books published and get famous. And that's what the CIA does, right? They pull strings. You are absolutely right, Hemcar. You are absolutely right. All right. Now I am going to put on, before I keep answering super chats, I've got 3 more super chats. 2 new ones came in, but keep the super chats rolling in. Give me something to talk about. I'm going to put on the red flag. Why not? Because it's holiday time. I want you, this is a brain worm. I want to plant it in your brain. Every time you hear "Oh Christmas Tree," I want you to hear these words. I want you to hear these words. I want, I want you to hear the people's flag is deepest red. That's what I want you to hear every time you hear "Oh Christmas Tree." I want you to do just what I do. Every time you hear "Oh Christmas Tree," these lyrics go through your head. Very good. Very, very good. All righty. The other thing, these communist and left groups cannot link the struggle of Palestinians to the struggles the workers face every day at home. Exactly. They refuse to do that. They go out of their way not to do that. And that's just something we just got to do it ourselves, right? You want something done, you got to do it yourself. And, we're doing it. I mean, we're going to do it before our conference in Portland. We're having our own Palestine rally. So, yeah, I mean, that's just what you got to do, right? I mean, there's been a Rumble rant that has come in. But, yeah, you're absolutely right, David Fox. And that's, the job of communists in imperialist countries is to unify the working class of the imperialist country with the national liberation struggle of people around the world. We need to get American workers to realize their enemy is not on Wall Street. Their enemy is not in Iran or Russia or China. Their enemy is on Wall Street, and to stand and to see the Palestinians as their allies against the American imperialist system. Right? So now we got a Rumble rant. Aren't unions norm in solidarity with anti-imperialists? Pro-Palestine people were at the UAW rally where Biden was speaking, and members booed them when calling for a ceasefire, Jose Vega style. Well, that's good. I'm really glad to hear that. I'm really, really glad to hear that there were people there calling for a ceasefire. That's really good. Unfortunately, the labor unions on foreign policy tend to not be so good historically in the United States, right? Labor unions often support U.S. wars and such. I don't know what the UAW's official position is on Israel-Palestine, but the UAW does have a better record. The UAW, they opposed sending aid to the Contras in Nicaragua. They took a strong stance, and they came out against the Vietnam War. And the United Auto Workers has always been more of a left-wing union. They're the ones that paid for Dr. Martin Luther King's rallies, right? I mean, the big march on Washington That was the March for Jobs and Freedom. And it was the UAW, United Auto Workers, that paid for the whole thing. So the UAW historically has been better and more left-wing than most labor unions. But in a lot of ways, though, there's many examples you can give. But in a lot of ways, the labor union bureaucracy, that's one of the issues they've been very bad, is they've been supporters of U.S. foreign policy. You can read, there's a lot written about someone's in the chat talking about AFL-CIA, the Solidarity Center. There's a lot written about the role of American intelligence, J. Love Stone, et cetera, in manipulating the labor movement. A lot's been written about that. But to be fair, I don't know where this happened, but was this if this was in Michigan, there's a lot of Arab Americans in Dearborn, Michigan. Dearborn, Michigan is the highest concentration of Arab Americans that you'll find anywhere, right? Some of the biggest Palestine protests are in Dearborn, Michigan, among Arab Americans. So there you go. And actually, if you read, I do recommend one book that, if you want to read about the history of the new communist movement, one book I would recommend, if I can reach around and get it here, right, is this book, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, which is about DRUM, which was the Dodge Revolutionary Union movement. It was the communist faction of the United Auto Workers in the 70s that was very effective. They were Maoist communists, and they basically ran the Detroit United Auto Workers. They formed the League of Revolutionary Black Workers, and they were Maoist communists. And they ran the Black Workers, the Auto Workers Union of Detroit. You can watch, there's a documentary about them, that you can watch. It's very powerful. So yeah. Go and read Detroit, I Do Mind Dying. Or there's a movie, there's like a short documentary film called Finally Got the News. And I'll see if I can link that in the chat that you can watch. Yeah, it's 57 minutes long. It's called Finally Got the News. And it's about the Finally Got the News. It's from 1978? No, 1973, I think. Yeah, and it's about this Maoist communist faction of the United Auto Workers. And it's a great documentary film, that you can watch about this Maoist communist faction. So yeah, there you go. Finally Got the News. Finally Got the News. I would recommend you watch that, learn about that history there. And that, yeah, they're in Detroit. Detroit is one of the only places where the new communist movement, the NCM, was successful. The conditions were just right. There was enough pro-labor atmosphere in Detroit. People had this attitude that unions were good, that economic leftist stuff was good. And it was in a largely black city. And so there was a lot of support for anti-colonialism. And you read what they did in Detroit. Kenneth Cockrell, Ken Cockrell, and there were a lot, Joanne Watson, and, General Baker. There was a guy named General Baker. That was literally his name, General Baker, right? He got called before the House Un-American Activities Committee. And they said to him, General, is that a name or a rank? Well, it was his name, General Baker. They thought maybe that was his rank in the Communist Party. But General Baker, right? He was a communist, a black communist leader, an auto worker, and a communist leader in Detroit. And that in the 70s, even up into the 80s, Maoist communists had a lot of influence in Detroit. And you can read about General Baker, right? I met General Baker a long time ago. He was not a young man when I met him. I'll tell you that much, but I did meet General Baker, right? And he worked with Nelson Peary. I always quote Nelson Peary on these streams. Well, one of the people, one of Nelson Peary's, allies was this guy, General Baker. And you can read about General Baker, right? General Baker was a very important communist auto worker leader in Detroit. He's got a Wikipedia page even. Go read about General Baker. And in the 70s and 80s, Detroit, there was a lot of communist influence in Detroit. Communist groups had a lot of influence among the black community in Detroit, right? It was like the perfect storm because the labor atmosphere in the city, because of the black struggle and the black freedom struggle, partially also because of Dearborn, right? Because back then the Palestinian struggle was led by communists, right? And that, Yemen, you had the Democratic People's Republic of Yemen, And you had the Palestinian stuff. And so all of that kind of combined, and it's all written. There's this book, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying, A Study in Urban Revolution. It's very good. And it goes over this history that in the 70s, Maoist communists, Marxist-Leninists, the new communist movement had a lot of influence in Detroit. And actually the first black mayor of Detroit, Coleman Young, he was not a communist himself, but he was very friendly to the Communist Party USA, so much so that he spoke at their events and stuff. Like they would have events in Detroit. The Communist Party USA would have an event, and Coleman Young would show up and speak at it. Like it was like that. He was that close to the Communist Party. It was rumored that Coleman Young, I believe, had been a member of one of the Maoist regroupments of the Communist Party. He'd been a member of, like, I think it was called Turning Points or Provisional Organizing Committee or something like that. But yeah, there's people who even claim he had been in the Communist Party USA. He was, Coleman Young was a Marxist and a fellow traveler, and he became mayor of Detroit. He was the first black mayor of Detroit, and he was mayor for many years. There's, if you really want to learn some of this history, Abayomi Azikiwe, right? Who's the editor of the Pan-African Newswire. He's a black Marxist intellectual. And he's given many talks about the history of Detroit and how Detroit was targeted because of the fact that it was, the city had a very radical leftist atmosphere, and so because of that, it was targeted. And that you go check out his stuff. Starting My Bookshelf. What are the first ML? Okay, you're on the list. And I see that there's another Rockfin tip tonight. Wish we could put these quotes in leaflets and hang them on doors. He's talking about the quotes about COINTELPRO and the Church Committee. Perhaps on the back of CPI events. 1999 Memphis Court and Northwood's documents really changes everything and shatters the mainstream media lies. We trained Savak in the Nazi torture techniques. Absolutely. I mean, look, the history of the CIA. People call you a conspiracy theorist if you talk about it. But yeah, the fact that, the Iranian secret police under the Shah were trained in Nazi torture techniques. That actually happened. So there you go. But yeah, and yeah, there you go. All righty. Would you debate Destiny on Palestine and Israel? No, I won't, because I already debated Destiny. I debated Destiny once already, and I kicked his ass, right? I epically destroyed Destiny. And in that debate, he was dishonest so many times, and I still kicked his ass. But I will play you all a clip from that debate. It's obvious that he is not an honest actor. He wanted to debate me right after Russia invaded Ukraine. I've already debated him. The only reason I'm going to debate people at this point is because I want to expand my audience, right? And Destiny's audience already knows about me. So I already debated Destiny. I already made a fool out of him. So why would I want a rematch just so he could, and just so he can practice and make me look dumb? No, I debated Vosh. I got access to his audience. I debated Molyneux. Molyneux continues to want to have a rematch with me. I already destroyed him, right? If you win, don't do it again, right? Now, I want to debate somebody new, right? But no, I'm not going to debate Destiny again because I already destroyed him, and that he's been watching that debate over and over again, practicing, figuring out the way I am. No, I will debate a new person to get access to a new audience, but I'm not going to debate somebody again just to give after they've already debated me. It's not how it works, right? It's like Muhammad Ali. Did Muhammad Ali fight somebody and win? And then another year, and he fought him again. And then another year, and he fought him again. I mean, maybe he did. I don't know enough about boxing history. But no, I mean, if I've beaten somebody already, what do I gain from, having a rematch so they can beat me? I mean, no. I debated Destiny, and I did an amazing job, right? And it was really a great moment. And I think this was the most epic moment of the debate. I'm going to put it on here. But in this debate, look at how dishonest he is, right? Watch this. This is a great moment from that debate. But in this, you'll see why I won't debate him again. I won't debate him again because he was so slimy and so dishonest in this debate. So slimy and dishonest. There were many occasions in which I even caught him. I saw him trying to set up some stupid trickery. At one point in the debate, he says to me, what if people, well, what would you do if people don't agree? And I said, I know what that is, right? I'm supposed to then advocate government. And I mean, there's many examples of him trying to just engage in slimy debating techniques. The beginning of the debate isn't very good because he keeps trying to make me draw an intricate blueprint of what communism will look like. And I don't. I refuse to do that because that's not scientific. But he wants me to tell him exactly how many French fries there will be in the restaurant and under socialism, how many French fries you get on your plate when you order a hamburger so he can take it apart. That's a game. I listen to a lot of his debates. He always tries to get his person he's debating to come up with a really intricate, complicated blueprint so he can take it apart. Well, I refused to give that to him. I refused to. And that frustrated him because that was his first technique, is he wanted me to just give him a really complicated blueprint he could punch holes in, and I wasn't going to do that. And then from there, and then his weakness in the debate, and the reason I did so well in the debate was because Destiny, he's so arrogant. He assumed that socialism's never accomplished anything, right? That's what he literally believes. He's just so ignorant, and he was just freaking out. And here, I'll put it on for you. This was epic.
From the New York Times. Under NAFTA, as a result, 20 million Mexicans live in food poverty. 25% of the population does not have access to basic food, and 1/5 of Mexican children suffer from malnutrition. As the U.S. heavily subsidized corn and other staples poured into Mexico, producer prices dropped and small farmers found themselves unable to make a living. Some 2 million people have been forced from their farms, right? Mexico's not producing its own food. It's a captive market. It's importing American food, and it's devastated the country. Mexico is poor, and American agribusiness stays rich. That's capitalism. That's why we had the American Revolution. The British Empire was trying to tell us here in the United States that we couldn't develop our own industries. We had to buy from the British. And as a result, we had a revolution so that we could develop our own economy. And the same thing the British Empire was doing to us, capitalism and the huge multinational corporations are doing around the world, keeping countries like Haiti, countries like Nigeria, countries like India captive markets. And countries are constantly fighting to try and break out of this. And the socialist revolutions of the 20th century, they didn't happen in Western Europe as Marx had predicted. They happened in the developing world because capitalism was keeping these countries as impoverished captive markets without their own industries, without their own economic growth, and keeping them as basically vassals, as dependent states, client states that are impoverished and suffering. And socialism was those countries breaking out, planning their economy, and industrializing.
Because I talked with Kyle Kalinske about this. I don't know. I would love to read where these bizarro anti-NAFTA studies are coming from. I've seen very pointed anti-NAFTA propaganda that will hyper focus on specific industries that say corn markets were disproportionately impacted in Mexico and so many jobs were lost here. But Mexico was one of the large winners in NAFTA, and this is something that I've seen universally heralded. Exports under farm exports in Mexico. Well, you can't say sure to that. You just literally told me that NAFTA took a shit all over Mexico's economy.
The New York Times agrees with me. The headline of the article is, "Under NAFTA, Mexico suffered and the United States felt its pain, November 24th, 2013. I guess they're lying to hurt American capitalism or something.
I'm sorry. Are you literally citing me an op-ed to tell me that opinion piece is somehow reflective of the economic consensus on NAFTA?
Yes, I'm citing the statistics in that op-ed, yes. I'm citing something that even the New York Times admits, that Mexico has been very badly hurt by free trade.
The New York Times is not an economic journal. Why are you telling me that even the New York Times? Also, wait, I'm sorry. Wait a second. Is this article, what's the author of this article?
The author is Laura Carlson.
Wait, what is her background? Is this literally an opinion piece, or was this written
a statement against interest? The New York Times is a defender of Western capitalism. The fact that even they would admit what it has done to Mexico, I think, is very strong. Or while we're at it, I have the CIA World Factbook statistics of life expectancy in front of me. Cuba's life expectancy is 78.9 years. The Dominican Republic, another country in the Caribbean that's part of the Western capitalist system, 71 years. Jamaica, 74. Honduras, 71. Guyana, 68. Mexico, 76. Guatemala, 71. Haiti, 64. Come on. right? Capitalism's the answer. Why are all these countries that are part of the free trade system, or part of the global capitalist system, impoverished? And Cuba, a country with a centrally planned economy, has achieved a much higher life expectancy.
Okay, I don't know about life expectancy. We're jumping onto a totally different argument. Okay, so like, so somebody linked me this article, so just reading it, right? Like, this person literally says, like, damages were done to, like, Mexico's agricultural sector. It doesn't mention the massive gains made in the industrial sector. Hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs were created in Mexico. I think it's like 20% of car imports in the United States come from Mexico. These are jobs that paid citizens more money than the farming jobs, that led to a greater industrialization of Mexico in these parts. She literally, in the next, like, paragraph of this article, just says, well, as a result of some of these agricultural practices, 20 million Mexicans live in food poverty. That's not a causal link. Like, how many Mexicans, like, this is...
They owned their own farms beforehand, and now they're in food poverty. They're not even producing their own food.
Wait, so you're telling me that prior to NAFTA, every citizen of Mexico was well-fed, totally well-nourished, had all sorts of, like... No, come on, this is ridiculous.
Ms. Carlson's article is that it made conditions worse. And I think if you look at the narco drug-infested chaos that's involved in Mexico, if that were happening in Venezuela, we'd be told, see, socialism did it. But it happens in Mexico, and we're told, oh, I've even had a lot of libertarians try to tell me that Mexico must be socialist because it's poor, right? Because everyone knows capitalism leads to prosperity. That's simply not the facts.
I can't actually, like, I can't argue against a New York Times op-ed on this.
Let's stay away from doing that.
If you want, like, we can dig through, because I've read so many, like,
that defends the free market system.
The New York Times does not defend economic. I don't care what the New York Times says about the economic impact. Now, if like Krugman or somebody's like, or Krugman is writing an article or something talking about like a specific, like, I'm sure I'm interested in reading that. Or if Borjas is writing something on immigration and he submits an op-ed, but random like people writing articles in the New York Times, I'm going to appeal to like the wider studies that look at like NAFTA's economic impact. Or we can read things from like the Council of Foreign Relations, or we can read things that are published in like different economic journals to see like the actual impact. I'm like appealing to a single opinion article on the New York Times.
I think that people throughout those sources you listed would agree about the conditions in many of the capitalist countries of the world. I mean, this is the CIA World Factbook. I just read you the life expectancies throughout the countries nearby Cuba and compared them. What?
What does that prove? What does life expectancy prove?
What is? Yeah, right. Who cares if people die sooner? I mean, oh, okay, all right. It doesn't matter, right? Life expectancy, who cares about that?
Wait, right? What do you think I just asked? Wait, what was the question I just asked?
You said, what does life expectancy prove?
Okay. Do you think that means I want people to die early?
No, but apparently you're saying it doesn't matter how long people live, right?
No, what I'm asking you is, what do you think? What I'm asking you is, what do you
when you're improving people's life expectancy and their access to healthcare and their quality of life, that's a good thing. But what does it prove? Oh, okay. What does it prove?
Well, what I'm saying is that just because you see an increase in life expectancy...
We're going around in circles here. Honestly, I don't know if we should keep going. I mean, we're just kind of repeating ourselves. But
okay, so just as a quick thing, just because life expectancy improves, one, that's not even necessarily reflective of positive underlying things. And two, it doesn't necessarily mean you can attribute it solely to like an economic organization or a particular government. So, for example, one country might have access to more food than another country. That country might become more obese, and you might see a decrease in their life expectancy. Type 2 diabetes can lead to anywhere from a 7 to 13-year decrease on your lifespan, right? So if you were to compare the life expectancy of two countries like that, this is just one example out of 50 trillion potential hypotheticals. Maybe the increase in immigration to the United States, the lower average life expectancy of, say, African Americans or Hispanic people are keeping the life expectancy of the United States down compared to other socialist countries. Just appealing to one stat and saying, well, the life expectancy in Cuba is higher than the life expectancy in the United States, that doesn't prove anything. So when I ask, like, well, what does that mean? That stat is totally meaningless.
I don't think Cuba's life expectancy is higher than the United States. I think it's pretty close, but I don't think it's higher. I'm reading to you from The Guardian, November 27th, 2016. Quote, Cuba's literacy rate is at 100%, and its life expectancy parallels first world nations, despite limited funding and supplies. The country's ratio of doctors to patients, its proactively community-centered approach to healthcare has long been the envy of Western countries, not the least the UK. I think that's an example of central planning improving people's lives.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think so, but I guess it's another argument.
I have some questions from chat if we want to do that.
Yeah, see, that's why I'm not, like, I destroyed him there epically. But that's why I'm not going to do a debate like that again, because you saw what a lying sack of shit he was there. He was trying to say, well, maybe people in Cuba have so much more food than people in Haiti, and they're like fat and they die of diabetes. I mean, it's like, he's not an honest actor. He's not an honest actor. He is a debate bro. He is a debate bro scumbag, right? And any debate I would have with him would just be intended to, and I already destroyed him, right? So if somebody else wants to come along, Hassan Piker or somebody wants to come along, look, Keffels, Keffels is a strange creature. I'll just tell you that much. Keffels wanted to debate me, and I was thinking, okay, I'll do it. And then Keffels started like insulting me, and I'm like, why would I want to engage with you further? Keffels started supporting the imprisonment of the Uhuru movement and saying that the only reason I support the Uhuru movement is because I'm a Russian agent and I should be jailed next. And I'm thinking, I really don't want to debate you. Keffels reaches out to me. Oh, will you debate me? And I said, I'll think about it, and then she throws a bunch of sex stuff at me. And Keffels is a very unhinged person. And it's like, I just wouldn't debate her. What would be in it for me? I mean, and she wanted to debate the trans issue. I don't care about the trans issue, right? Which it's weird, if she really cares about trans people, why would she want to make me trans people's enemy? I'm pretty much neutral. I don't care. If people want to be trans, they can be trans. If adults want to have trans surgery, I don't care. I'm against bullying. I'm against hate crimes. Let live and let live. But she wants to make me an enemy of trans people to get attention. And so I didn't even really like the idea. And then when she started spewing all this crazy stuff at me, so it's like, I will debate people to get access to a new audience. So I'm open to doing that. But for the most part, I'm not interested in debating people because, I'm not going to rematch. Molyneux, that was an epic debate. Happy I did that one. Destiny, that was a good debate, but I'm not going to give him a rematch. Jason and Ruhe, what the hell was that? That debate was just weird. I mean, I wiped the floor with him, but it was like, what the hell? So I don't know. I mean, I'm open to future debates, but I'm not going to rematch with someone I've already destroyed. Not going to do that. So there you go. All righty. All right. So they attack you, then you're doing something right because exactly. Well, yeah, we're doing great. We're doing great. And, I kind of addressed that. I addressed that when you said it. There's another Rockfin tip that has come in. Another Rockfin tip has come in. So the Rockfin tip is right. But when you show them proper citation from the New York Times, they can't call you names. Exactly. Right. You read off the citations, you have sources to back up what you're saying. It's very hard for them to call you names, but there you go. There you go. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for keeping you informed. And I don't know what you're doing. What do you do for a living, Alex? How am I keeping you informed and entertained? But there you go. There you go. If you debate again, please make it Jordan Peterson. I would love to debate Jordan Peterson. I would absolutely love to do that. If anyone can help arrange that, I would happily debate Jordan Peterson. Yes, the lobsters would debate Jordan Peterson. Anyway, no, I would love to debate Jordan Peterson, actually. I mean, I have debunked so many of his videos. I debunked his video, The Truth About Communism. I debunked his recent Israel-Palestine video. You work at a security hospital. Oh, I had a friend who did a similar job. I know that can be rough. So glad I'm providing you with some entertainment. You should reach out to him, LOL. Well, there you go. I've tweeted at him a few times, but there you go. There you go. All right. We got one last question. Unless anyone has any other questions, mind you, right? Rumble rants, Rockfin tips, keep me talking. But we have another one here. Starting my bookshelf. What are the first ML texts I would recommend? Well, Nicholas, what I always tell people, right? And I get, not everyone agrees with me about everything. But if you're getting into this stuff, start with textbooks. That's what I would urge you to do. Get The History of the Three Internationals by William Z. Foster. Get the Foundations of Marxism, Leninism, which is an old Soviet textbook. Get a textbook first. And from the textbooks, go and read the classics. Because a lot of people, and I did this too, the classics, part of our tradition in Marxism is we write polemics. We write arguments, right? You know, Marx, all of Marx's big books are arguments, right? He wrote The Critique of the Goethe Program. What is that? It's a critique of the Goethe Program. It's this bunch of socialists got together in Goethe, Germany, and they wrote a program. And Marx read it and he said, no, they got it all wrong. So he wrote a great book, which I quote a lot, The Critique of the Goethe Program. There was a socialist who was popular, kind of an anarchist who was popular in Marx's day, named Proudhon. Proudhon wrote a book called The Philosophy of Poverty. So Karl Marx wrote a book called The Poverty of Philosophy, right? There was a very popular socialist leader who was around back in Germany in the 1800s named Düring. So Engels wrote a book called Anti-Düring. And later they edited it down into a book called Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific. You know, Lenin wrote a book called The State and Revolution. And that book is all a polemic against Kautsky and against Bernstein and, What Is to Be Done. I just held up What Is to Be Done by Lenin. This book it's polemical. He's arguing against, against Plekhanov and the leaders of the Russian Marxism. So the problem is if you try to read this first, or if you try to read this first, you're going to get confused because you're not going to know the context. The context, you're going to be like, what? Who's Plekhanov? Who's the Goethe? It's not going to make sense. My advice is if you're getting into studying Marxist ideology, which I recommend, please do study Marxism, get a textbook. Right? Now, we have our own textbook at the Center for Political Innovation. We published our own textbook, which is called We Are City Builders, the Center for Political Innovation Educational Manual. Oh, another one. You asked it the other night, but I'll answer it once again. We have our textbook, so, might be a good place to start. But or you can get Foundations of Marxism-Leninism, which is a very, very good book. It was an old Soviet book, a Soviet published book, The Foundations of Marxism-Leninism, the Fundamentals of Marxism-Leninism. Sorry, The Fundamentals of Marxism-Leninism. That's a very good book as well. And I recommend that. The Fundamentals of Marxism-Leninism, right, which was a Soviet textbook. I recommend that. Get the History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. I recommend that. And that's what I would start with. History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Our book, We Are City Builders. Start with this, right? That's, for modern, like the most recently published one. The History of the Three Internationals by William Z. Foster. The Fundamentals of Marxism-Leninism. Start with that. And then based on what you read in the textbook, go and read the original text. That is my advice, so that you don't get confused. Because if you just start with this, right, when you start reading What Is to Be Done, the first time I tried to read What Is to Be Done, I couldn't make heads or tails of it because there were so many references to old Russian newspapers and so many names and so many quotes. It sounded like gibberish to me, right? It's very difficult to jump into the classics if you don't know the context. So my advice is to read textbooks first, right? That is my advice. Terry says classic. There you go. There you go. Classic. There you go. But that's my advice. Generally, read a textbook first and then read the classics once you've read the textbooks. Okay? That's my advice. So Gabby agrees. There you go, Nicholas. Hope I'm helpful. Yeah. I would start with the textbook. I will say, the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. I cannot recommend this book enough. I really learned a lot from the history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. This published in 1936, and Stalin wrote a lot of it. He wrote most of this book. It was the official history of the Soviet Union from the time when they were just talking about Bolshevism right up to the time they took power. Short course. People just call it short course, History of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union. If you want to understand communism, communist theory, I would recommend you read this. This is a really great place to start. I would recommend that. And the last comment that I'll make in response to Nicholas, and then I'll go on to answer, this question. If anyone has any more questions, keep them coming. The last thing I'll say is this. I fell in love when I was in high school, and it took me so long to find it. I read the Communist Manifesto. I kind of got it. And then I tried to read other Marx stuff. I read some Lenin. I read Imperialism, the Highest Stage of Capitalism, and I kind of got it. But I really didn't understand this. Oh, Gala, I wrote a letter to Jordan Peterson, Caleb. Next to zero chances it will work, but crazier things have happened. Love your work. Well, thanks, Gala. Thank you, and good luck to you. That's a nice thing to do. Nice thing for you to do. I when I was in high school, I discovered the old pamphlets of the Communist Party USA, right? And some of that stuff, if you really want a very clear, concise way of understanding it, some of that stuff is gold. Why Communism by Moishe Olgun. Amazing pamphlet. Why Communism by Moishe Olgun. Moishe Olgun was leader of the Communist Party in New York City, and he wrote this very short pamphlet. It's less than 100 pages long. It's called Why Communism? Plain Talk on Vital Problems, right? Amazing, amazing pamphlet, right? And there's a lot of pamphlets like that from the Communist Party, where they were trying to explain their ideas in the most clear and concise language possible, right? Read Why Communism by Moishe Olgun. I recommend it. Read Toward Soviet America by William Z. Foster, right? Read Twilight of World Capitalism by William Z. Foster. Toward Soviet America by William Z. Foster, right? Twilight of World Capitalism by William Z. Foster. All right. These guys, William Z. Foster, they were communist leaders and they were working class. Moishe Olgun, William Z. Foster, they were working class guys who were they built a very effective mass movement, and they were very good at explaining what they believed very clearly and concisely. I would recommend that. Another writer that I actually, I don't know, maybe it's hard to get your hands on them, but there's a lot of little pamphlets by Kim Il-sung that are amazing, right? Kim Il-sung is an amazing writer. Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il, they have a way of just kind of explaining communist ideas in very concise ways, right? If you can get your hands on them, I don't know if they're online or not, but some of the Kim Il-sung, he's just like, here's what socialism is. Here's what capitalism is. Here's what we're doing on the Korean Peninsula. I mean, it's very to the point, right? Which shows that they're mass organizers, right? That's what it shows. Kim Jong-il has a great pamphlet, Abuses of Socialism Will Not Be Tolerated. And there's a lot of these very short pamphlets that the North Koreans published, right? I mean, this is by Kim Jong-il, Abuses of Socialism Are Intolerable. And it's his analysis of why the Soviet Union fell. I'll just drop it in the chat. It's great, right? And it's very clear and it's to the point, right? And, you read it and it's just boom, right? It all makes sense. It all makes sense. That kind of stuff I recommend. That is what, I always would read trying to understand the ideas so that I could explain them to a friend or a coworker. And that's the kind of literature I was looking for. Pamphlets from the Communist Party in the 1930s, pamphlets from William Z. Foster. And that's the kind of thing I would recommend. And now, while we're at it, I cannot scream loudly enough about Anna Louise Strong. I love Anna Louise Strong. Anything by Anna Louise Strong. Anna Louise Strong was amazing. American journalist, socialist. She lived in the Soviet Union, the Stalin era, I Change Worlds. Anything by Anna Louise Strong. Full endorsement to Anna Louise Strong. So I know that's more of an answer than you wanted, Nicholas. But I'm just giving you, if you want to get into this stuff, that's a great place to start. That's all a great place to start. I would start with the books I recommended rather than going to just directly dig into the Marx and the Lenin. Dig into the Marx and Lenin. Read the Marx and Lenin. But I would recommend a textbook first. I would recommend some of these books first so that you kind of learn the basics first, and then you can dig into the text. Because if you just start with the text, it's going to seem like gibberish. So there you go. All right. Thoughts on Saul Alinsky? Well, I think just so you know, communist majoritarian, I think you asked this before, and I had started the closing music, and so then I stopped the closing music, and then I answered it, but maybe you already missed it. But I will answer this because it's an important question. Saul Alinsky, he's become famous now because during the Obama years, he became kind of a fixation of Glenn Beck and conservatives, right? Saul Alinsky was the leader of the Democratic Party, a strategist of the Democratic Party in Chicago during the 1960s and 70s. He was kind of the guy who helped organize the political operations of the Democratic Party in Chicago in the 60s and 70s. And he was like this community organizing guru, and Saul Alinsky, he wrote a book called Rules for Radicals, which is pretty basic. It's just pretty basic. I mean, it's not, it's kind of like how to persuade people and what's wrong with capitalism and how unfair our society is. All right, you're on the list. And, but, it's pretty basic stuff. But because Obama had taught classes on that book, which was like a political strategy book, Glenn Beck and all them started talking about it. So who was Saul Alinsky? Saul Alinsky was never a member of the Communist Party USA, from what I understand. He lived in Chicago, and he was around the Communist Party, right? There's a very, very good book that last time you asked this question, which I don't know if you saw it or not. This is a great book, Red Chicago. And in Red Chicago, right? I mean, Chicago was a center of Communist Party power in the 1930s. In the early 1930s, they organized unemployment councils where people who'd lost their jobs could get like some support. They would feed them, and they would organize them to go harass elected officials and demand aid. And, Chicago organized huge rallies to support Ethiopia. And the Communist Party had a lot of influence in Chicago during the 1930s. Saul Alinsky lived in Chicago, and he was working with them. Now, he never joined, from what I understand, but he was involved in the Communist Party, and he was a labor union organizer, and he really liked John L. Lewis. John L. Lewis was the leader of the miners' union of miners in West Virginia and such, and John L. Lewis started the CIO, right? So you had the American Federation of Labor, and the American Federation of Labor said it would only organize what they called skilled workers. And so, factory workers were generally not organized. You had to be a craftsman to be in the AFL. Well, the story goes that John L. Lewis, leader of the miners' union, was at the AFL convention, and someone disrespected him, so he punched him in the face, and he walked out of the AFL convention, and he formed the CIO. Well, John L. Lewis, was the leader of the miners' union, and he was actually a Republican, which is, he wasn't a communist. He was a Republican. He was a conservative, but he was a brilliant labor union boss. Saul Alinsky worked for John L. Lewis, and he actually wrote a biography of John L. Lewis. So what that means is that Saul Alinsky was a friend, an ally of the Communist Party when they were doing community work in Chicago, and he was in the CIO. John L. Lewis ended up being the head of the CIO after being head of the miners' union. Saul Alinsky was a CIO guy. He was a Roosevelt-supporting, socialist-friendly, communist-adjacent organizer in the 1930s. After World War II, he continued being a Democrat, right? After the Roosevelt stuff went down, and he was just the Democratic Party's strategist, and he was very good at assembling mobs of poor people to get shit done for the Democratic Party. And the Democratic Party of Chicago is notoriously corrupt, Mayor Daley, all of that. And he was just a guy who was very, very, very good at mobilizing poor people to help the Democrats win elections, help them accomplish goals. He was a community organizer, right? You can watch video of Saul Alinsky on YouTube, and it's not very impressive, honestly, right? It's part of that, when someone gets to be, famous, when someone gets the reputation of being really smart, that like they don't try very hard in their speeches because everyone's already expecting whatever they say to be smart, and so they don't like have to do very well. But I don't know, Saul Alinsky, he's this older guy, and he talks like this, and you know, oh, sure. And, you know, I mean, it's like there's a video of a speech he gives, and, you know, I don't know. I'll show you how he starts one of his speeches, if I can find the clip here. It's kind of weird, if I can remember the clip. You know, maybe I can't find it, but, you know, I mean, like, you know, he talks kind of like this, and, you know, oh, he's laid back, see, and he's not, you know, he's not giving a formal speech. He just kind of relaxed there, and he walks up to the podium. Who wants me to talk about this? Oh, okay, I'll talk about. Anyone else want to have a suggestion about what I talk about tonight? Okay, what should I talk about? I mean, it's, you know, he's just this older community organizer who'd been around the Communist Party in the 1930s. He wrote a biography of John L. Lewis, and he'd been in part of the CIO and part of that Communist Party Unemployment Council milieu. I don't think he ever joined the CPUSA, but I don't, you know, you won't find quotes from Marx in Saul Alinsky's writings. He wasn't, you know, most of his life, he was not a Marxist. He was just kind of a Democratic Party organizer of poor people. But I guess, you know, early on in his life, I mean, if you were politically active in labor unions and unemployment councils and stuff like that in Chicago in the 1930s, you had to be friendly to the Communist Party. And if he was a CIO guy, he would have been very close to the Communist Party. So that's Saul Alinsky. And I hope that answers your question. As far as Lewis was based, the story about John L. Lewis that I always find to be the coolest is when the workers in Flint, Michigan occupied their factory in 1937. John L. Lewis went to the factory and he stood in front of it and ripped his shirt open. And he said, if they're going to shoot anybody, they're going to have to shoot me. And he ripped his shirt open. I find that to be very badass. Very, very badass. The other thing about John L. Lewis is that John L. Lewis had huge eyebrows. John L. Lewis, I will show you. That was a man who had very, very large eyebrows. You know, you don't mess with those eyebrows. I will show you. I mean, he gave Brezhnev a run for his money. I mean, his eyebrows are bigger than Brezhnev's eyebrows, I think. I mean, these were epically huge eyebrows. Nobody has eyebrows the size of John L. Lewis. I mean, it is something spectacular. You know, the eyebrows that man had. That it's like nothing you've ever seen before. You know, I mean, it's massive eyebrows. Here, I'll try to show you a picture of him here. All right, here we go. I'll put you a picture. John L. Lewis, the leader of the miners' union. Yeah. Those are massive eyebrows. I mean, you know, they said Brezhnev had big eyebrows. Brezhnev had nothing on those eyebrows. I mean, that's insane. That's crazy. I mean, let's pull up Brezhnev. Brezhnev's eyebrows are big, but Brezhnev's eyebrows are not that big. I mean, you know, that's like, you know, that's wild. I mean, Leonid Brezhnev, leader of the Soviet Union, he also had big eyebrows, but not like this guy, right? I'll pull up Leonid Brezhnev, right? We'll pull up Brezhnev, you know, here's an example of me not being biased toward Russia, right? I'm admitting that this American labor leader had bigger eyebrows than Brezhnev, right? See, I'm not always biased in everything I say toward Russia, people. So there you go. Yeah, Brezhnev, leader of the Soviet Communist Party in the 70s. Now, those are big eyebrows. Those are very, very, very big eyebrows that Brezhnev has, but they are nowhere near as big as John L. Lewis's eyebrows, right? Those are big. I'll give you. Those are huge eyebrows. Leonid Brezhnev had very big eyebrows, but I just have to be honest. Here. John L. Lewis's eyebrows are much bigger. I'm sorry. I mean, just being honest here. Anyway, here we go. There we go. Okay, so the next question is thoughts on Carl Jung and psychoanalysis. All right, so psychoanalysis was invented by Sigmund Freud. Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung were collaborators. They worked together, and then they had a falling out. And after they had their falling out, Carl Jung went his own way, and Carl Jung got really into the paranormal. He got really interested in, synchronicities and whether or not people could talk to the dead and predict the future, and that Carl Jung kind of went his own direction. And he went in kind of a religious, spiritual, new age kind of direction. Whereas Sigmund Freud was Sigmund Freud still. So, I mean, my knowledge, I have studied Freud. I have not studied Jung. I should study Jung. I know Jung is a big trend. I mean, obviously Jordan Peterson promotes Carl Jung, but also Jimmy Dore. I know RFK promotes Carl Jung. But I have not studied Carl Jung. I have studied Freud. And I have gotten very interested in psychoanalysis. And see, here's the problem with psychoanalysis. It's not scientific, okay? In the sense that there's no experiments. You can't do an experiment to prove psychoanalysis. And that basically what psychoanalysis began as is that Sigmund Freud, he sat down with a lot of people, prisoners, college students, all kinds of people, and he just sat down with them and asked them their life story, asked them how they saw things, and he noticed certain patterns, certain things that were very, very, very common in people. And it's like a cluster of things. The problem that people have with it, which is a fair point, I don't disagree with them, is he says this is because of this, right? And that's what a lot of all this stuff that people talk about the anal retentive and about the Oedipus complex and the electric complex, all of that, is that he met people who were a certain way over and over and over again. And based on that, and he noticed that people that are, right, I mean, like one thing that Sigmund Freud noticed, right? I'll just throw this out there. And this is a part of Freudian psychoanalysis that, I mean, I would say the vast majority of Freudians now reject, which is the idea. Freud noticed that a lot of gay men are very effeminate. That's true. A lot of gay women are very butch. That's true. And so he developed this idea that gay men, they're too girly and their fathers reject them. And so the reason that they are gay is that they're longing for the love of their father they didn't get because their father rejected them for being too girly. And gay women, they're butch and their mothers reject them because they're butch. And so as they grow up, they become lesbian because they're longing for motherly affection. Well, what's wrong with that? Are many gay men effeminate? Yes. Are many gay women or lesbians butch? Yes. But does that mean what he said? No, right? And you can't do an experiment to prove that. And nowadays, most people would say, no, that's not what's going on there. That's not what's going on there, right? It's not, people would say that and that's the problem. That's why it's not considered to be science. Okay. It's not considered to be science because he assigns causality, right? He notices certain things are grouped together. There's a lot of people who are gay and they tend to be gender nonconforming. And so I'm going to say that gay and nonconforming are linked because of this story I invented. Well, that's not science, right? However, as Funky says, there are certain archetypes that we all possess. This analysis comes from Carl Jung, and that there are certain patterns. That one thing about Freud is that, and this is a very good point that's made about Sigmund Freud, is that everything that Freud got, right, that's widely accepted, no one gives him credit for. Okay? Talk therapy was invented by Sigmund Freud. Now, do we think talk therapy is a crazy, kooky thing? Of course not. It's actually mandated. A lot of times courts will require people to do it, right? Talk therapy is like part of our culture in America, right? I mean, it's just like, it's not only, it's in movies, it's widely accepted. Talk therapy is just like one of the most common forms of treatment in America now. It's like part of our culture. It's paid for by medical insurance companies. Well, Freud invented that. Now, do we give him credit for that? No, we don't. However, penis envy, the idea that every little girl is rejected by her father, so she develops this desire to have a penis, that sounds crazy. So when people think of Freud, they think of penis envy, and they go, Freud was a nut, and nobody, when they think of therapy, thinks of Freud, and that's not fair. And that's something that I will give credit to Freud for, right? The stuff he invented that was pretty smart, no one gives him credit for. And the stuff he said that was crazy is what everyone associates with him, and that's not fair. Okay? What else did Freud develop? The subconscious. Right? The fact that you have memories, thoughts, feelings that you're not aware of. The subconscious mind. That's Freud. No one had ever thought of that before. And I think it's pretty universally recognized that there's a subconscious now. Now, there are some people who do say there is no such thing as a subconscious, but they're very few and far between. You get these people that are really like, no, I'm a stickler. I am purely scientific. But most people acknowledge that the subconscious mind does exist. You have memories that you don't have access to because when you're walking down the street, suddenly you'll remember something you haven't remembered for years. Well, where was it all that time? It was in your subconscious. So the subconscious is real, right? And that's Freud. Freud invented the term subconscious. That's all Freud. And do we give him credit for that? Do people talk about their subconscious, their memory, their suppressed memories, all of that? No, do people talk about that? No. We just, that's just, talk therapy. That's fine. Subconscious mind, that's fine. But then you say Freud and people think of penis envy. People think of the fact that he screwed a lot of his patients, which he did. He had sex with a lot of his patients, which is completely unethical, predatory behavior, completely unacceptable. People think of the fact that he used cocaine and encouraged people to use cocaine, which he did, which nowadays we're not into people using cocaine. We don't generally think people using cocaine is a good thing. But, yeah, I mean, I find psychoanalysis to be fascinating. I'm not into the Jungian stuff because I just haven't gone down that route. Maybe I'll get to the point that I go down that route more. I haven't really gone into the Jungian route. I've read Freud, Civilization and Its Discontents. I reference in a lot of my work. I quote that book by Freud a lot because I think it really, Freud was very much a philosophical irrationalist. I think that Freud was probably a sociopath, to be honest. I think he was a sociopath. But that doesn't mean he didn't have a lot of astute observations. And in fact, I think the fact that he was a sociopath probably enabled him to be more disconnected in the way he presented his analysis, that he was able to observe things that if somebody had the empathy that a normal person would have, they would be biased. But yeah, there's an example of, Sigmund Freud financially preyed on people. He sexually preyed on people. He, used cocaine excessively. And there are a lot of his ideas that are completely debunked. One of the themes in Freud, right? If you look at classical psychoanalysis, they claim that you can be perfect, right? Through psychoanalysis, you can resolve all of your problems and you can just be a perfect person, right? Like Scientology, right? You can go clear or whatever. Well, that doesn't happen, right? That's been pretty widely debunked. Everyone is always, Freudianism, it argues that there's psychosis, which is when people are like literally crazy and not in touch with reality. And then there's neurosis, and everyone's neurotic a little bit. Well, Freud maintained that if he worked on you through years of therapy, you could become not neurotic anymore. That's bullshit. That's debunked, right? No one's ever been able to point to an example of somebody who's just not neurotic. All right. So the idea that Freud will make you a perfectly sane person with no neuroses whatsoever through his treatment, that didn't happen. And that, but it's certainly marketable, isn't it? Right. And that'll keep you coming back for years. Got to get toward that goal. Well, that's been debunked. You can't, right? So there's aspects of the Freudian thing that we can admit he was wrong about a lot of things, right? People aren't gay because of their relationship with their parents, but the other thing that I will say about Freud is that a lot of his ideas, when people mock them, it's because they are presenting them in a very, very, very crude, extreme way. You know, and that I'll give you. But, you know, Freud I find to be fascinating. But, I mean, if you read his book, Civilization and Its Discontents, I mean, he was, you know, I mean, he was a sociopath. He was a pessimist. He was not good in a lot of ways, okay? I don't think he was good in a lot of ways. And he was an anti-communist, and he believed human beings were just naturally aggressive. And he, you know, I think he wasn't a good dude, honestly. But that doesn't mean, you know, just because someone bad says something doesn't mean there's not truth in it. And I think he did actually discover and point to a lot of truth in his writing. So take that for what you will. And that psychoanalysis, I mean, again, the stuff involves people doing a huge amount of research into how people think. So there you go. All righty. Now, Lori asks, why Stalin stopped supporting Israel? My understanding is Israeli spies were showing up all over the Eastern Bloc, right? In Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union. You know, the Israelis were spying on the Soviet Union. And they were, he was constantly catching them spying on him and gathering intelligence, etc. My understanding is also that they were constantly accusing the Soviet Union of anti-Semitism groundlessly. They were trying to rally Jews around the world against the Soviet Union. In Czechoslovakia, they caught a wing of Israeli spies who were gathering intelligence, and they executed them. And Israeli media said, oh my God, it's a pogrom. They're anti-Semites. They hate Jews, and that's, and that, Israel started basically trying to incite Jewish people around the world against the Soviet Union. And on top of that, my understanding is that there were Israeli spies all over the Soviet Union that were gathering intelligence, etc. And that also, you have to remember, around this time, post-World War II, all the Arab countries, it's the wave of Arab national liberation struggles. First, you had Abdel Nasser in Egypt. And then after that, you had, the patriotic officers. And there was a wave of nationalism throughout the Arab world. Well, Israel aligned with the United States against the Arab nationalists. And so Israel, the Soviet Union is committed to backing national liberation struggles, and Israel is against national liberation struggles. Now, the Soviet Union did not officially oppose Israel until 1967. Right? That's when they recognized the Palestine Liberation Organization. During the 1967 war, when Israel went to war with like every Arab country, with Egypt led by Abdel Nasser being like the leading country. That's also when Israel sunk an American ship, the USS Liberty, right? But hundreds of Americans, I believe it was, how many sailors were killed, right? No one ever talks about that. The USS Liberty, that Israel, and it wasn't an accident, right? I mean, they tried to say it was an accident, but no, throughout the time they were radioing and saying, we're an American ship. They didn't think it was another ship. Israel intentionally attacked the USS Liberty, killed, 34 crew members on an American ship during the 1967 war. It was during that war that the Soviet Union officially recognized the Palestine Liberation Organization. But, originally Israel would not have been created without the Soviet Union backing it. That's a fact. And Israel, they backed the Soviet Union, the Soviet Union backed Israel because they thought it would be a socialist country. And they thought that, because the Jewish people of the world were overwhelmingly left-wing and progressive, because the communist parties of the world had a lot of Jewish members, and because the Holocaust had been so horrible and Jews had been so badly persecuted under fascism, they assumed that Israel was going to be a socialistic country. And so they supported Israel. And pretty quickly afterwards, they realized otherwise. And Israel also got the memo. I mean, it was kind of mutual, right? Really quickly afterwards, and it had a lot to do with spying. The Soviet Union was finding Israeli spies everywhere, and Israel was accusing the Soviet Union of being anti-Semitic and hating Jews, and it was pretty clear. The 1950s, all throughout the 50s, it was pretty clear that the Soviet Union was anti-Israel. The 67 war, though, that was like the last straw. But what I will say, and I mean, as much as I love Gus Hall, right? I gotta point this out to you, right? I mean, I must say this, okay? I love Gus Hall to death. Gus Hall was a great American communist leader. But this is his book, Imperialism Today. Imperialism Today by Gus Hall. And I will read to you. I will read to you how he starts out the piece he wrote about the 67 war. I'll read you the first couple paragraphs. Yeah, I mean, I think it's this one, Mideast Crisis. All right. This is a pretty good book otherwise. But yeah, I think this is the right one. No, it's not this one. Okay. Let me find the piece, because I want to show it to you how different it is than the way people talk today. Which piece is it? Mideast Crisis. Is it Mideast Crisis or? Where is it? Where is it? It's been a while since I've looked at this book, but yeah, I mean, this is Gus Hall's the leader of the Communist Party, and I'm just telling you, the way he talks in this book is not the way leftists talk nowadays, right? That's the foreword. Yeah, maybe it is that Mideast Crisis article. Maybe I just remembered it wrong. But he's explaining what imperialism is. He's giving the Soviet, an anti-imperialist perspective on world events. But when he starts talking about the Middle East, he's not talking the way communists nowadays talk. And this was in the 60s. I believe this is the article he wrote for the 1967 war. Yeah, let me see if I can find it here. And I will just, like, the opening of it is like, damn, I think this is it. Right? Yeah, this is it. Okay. Yeah, this is on page 161 of Imperialism Today by Gus Hall. Right? He says, the refusal of Arab countries to accept and to recognize Israel is short-sighted and wrong. The speeches and editorials reflecting these policies must be condemned. But they do not justify Israel's armed aggression. Right? I mean, there's just, he bends over backwards to support Israel. To say he's a big supporter of Israel, Israel should exist. The Arab countries not recognizing Israel is a crime. Pages and pages here, right? Right. He says, what is it? In the United States, the development of the Middle East cannot be viewed as a foreign affair. Yeah. It has a special effect on Jewish communities. Jewish nationalism has become a serious mass influence. It has new deep roots. And he denounces the Jewish Defense League, the JDL, but he's super careful how he talks about Israel. He basically is saying to Israel should be more friendly to the Soviet Union. That's kind of what he's saying. You read, and I'm reading, the essay in this book that he has about Israel is it's very, very pro-Israel while criticizing Israeli foreign policy. But it's very, very, very pro-Israel. And this book was published, this book I think was published in 1972, and that essay is from the 67 war, this book's published in 1972, and it's a good book in many, many ways, Imperialism Today. It even has a critique of China, and Chinese foreign policy for aligning with the United States, which is kind of interesting. Beware of Maoist opportunism. I recommend Imperialism Today by Gus Hall. It's a good book. It's one of the better Gus Hall books out there. I would recommend. But yeah, the stuff on Israel is pretty weak. All right, folks, it's late. Wow, we are about to hit the 3-hour mark, folks. We have not done a 3-hour stream in a long time. Wow, 3 hours. We are about to hit the 3-hour mark. Well, that's great. I'm going to put on closing music, and we'll hit the 3-hour mark right as we end. All right, cool, folks. All right. Let's do it. I'm putting the closing music on. We'll be back. You bet your bottom dollar we'll be back. We'll be back. Upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.